Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to the regularly scheduled Planning Commission meeting for August 11th. If you would, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Knapp, are there any announcements or changes to the agenda?
Good morning, Mr. Chair. There are three this morning. Four. Minutes for approval from July 14th, 2016. Item number 2, PDR 1606 ZP Neal Communities of Southwest Florida LLC, Tides End. There's a traffic impact statement and public comment letters attached. Item number 4, PDUI 1605G, Tropicana Manufacturing Company, Inc., Tropicana Master Development Plan. There's a traffic impact analysis attached. And item number 5, Highway and Traffic Standards Manual Update, Resolution R15-188 is deferred.
Thank you. Ms. Schenk, are there any changes or comments from the County Attorney's Office?
No changes.
Thank you. Commissioners, anything?
I had a question.
Mr. Rutledge?
So I just, when I was going through my notice for the event, the traffic impact study that was provided, that wasn't provided when we had our last meeting, right? It's just an addendum they've added?
It's my understanding that's new information or updated information.
So we haven't reviewed that. It's just being attached as a part of the minutes?
I believe it was sent last night with the intent that you would have time, but if of course you didn't see it by then.
Part of the minutes.
Yeah. So
It's not part of minutes.
It's not part of the minutes.
Excuse me, can you turn your mics up? Last time we had I'm hard of hearing, a couple others.
I have no knob to control volume. So.
Well, last time when you made this announcement, nobody heard it. So
Yeah.
with that, do something about it. Talk
Thank-
louder into your mic.
Thank you for the input. We need to keep comments from the audience to a minimum, though.
I need to hear.
Yeah. What was that, Ms. Knapp?
The 2 traffic impact statements are regarding items that will be heard today, nothing to do with the minutes. Is that?
Okay, so they were not attached to the minutes to be,
Oh,
Got it.
I'm sorry. The update included updates to an
gotcha.
item.
My mistake. Okay, I just hadn't seen that before, and I thought it was passing through as part of the minutes.
Thank you.
Okay. Sorry, my bad.
Not a problem. Are there any additional comments from any of the commissioners? Okay, we're going to go to the next item. The next item is minutes.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rhodes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of July 14th, 2016.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. DeLezine, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Chair votes aye. Motion passes unanimously. That's 6-0 with Mr. Ron being absent. Okay, the next item on the agenda is citizen comments. These are comments on any item that is not on the agenda today. If you want to speak to something that's on the agenda, you'll have an opportunity when the item is brought in front of the commission. But these are items that are not on the agenda. So is there anybody who wishes to come forward and make a statement on items not on the agenda? Is there anyone? Seeing no one come forward.
What's on the agenda? We don't need.
There's a published agenda. If you would, please keep comments from the audience down. If you would like to step forward and make a statement regarding items that are not on the agenda, please step forward. Yes, sir.
Larry Grossman. Want a clarification. If we understand that the Mayara subdivision application has been withdrawn or asked for continuous, and so our question, we have a lot of people here who would like to speak, and we're not sure whether that's on the agenda. We want to speak either in the public comment period because it has been removed from the agenda, or if it's still on the agenda, we want to speak and address that issue as an item on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. And again, the reason we try to make sure there are no comments from the audience, they have to be on record, so we ask you to step forward to make comments. With regard to Mayara, it is still on the agenda. The agendas are published, so it's on the agenda until somebody steps forward and asks for a continuance or the application be withdrawn or continued through the process. So when that item comes up on the agenda, you'll have an opportunity. It's my understanding that the applicant wishes the people who have come to speak on it to actually speak on it, so you'll have an opportunity. That's my understanding. But again, until that comes up and the applicant makes a clear statement with regard to intent, it's published on the agenda as an item.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify, the citizen comment portion is for items that are not quasi-judicial, so basically it's related to street vacations and council plan amendments.
Right.
Or text amendments.
Or process.
No development applications at all can be
Right.
spoken to as citizen comment.
Right, and process, so I was just explaining the process.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, again, is there anybody in the audience who wishes to come forward and make a statement regarding items that are not on the agenda? And while you're doing that, if you could, please silence your cell phones. Yes, sir, if you would, please state your name.
My name is Edward Goff, and I'm confused also because
sir.
I came here to talk about the Tides End project. which-
Right, and that's on the agenda, and you'll have an opportunity to speak to that item when we are
Okay,
finished with citizen
this
comments.
agenda has changed so much since last night when I saw it online. I was having a hard time following it. Thank you.
Right, thank you. So, anybody else who wishes to speak to items that are not on the agenda? Thank you very much. We're going to go to we're going to close the citizen comment portion and go to the next item, and that is consent agenda. And Ms. Knapp, if you would you please read item number 1 into the record?
Yes, item number 1, LDCT 1603, ordinance 1631. It's a county-initiated land development code text amendment, and staff is requesting for this item to be continued to September 8th, 2016.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 1? Is there anybody? Okay, seeing nobody come forward, we're going to go to item number 2. Ms. Knapp, if you would, please. I'm sorry, Ms. Knapp. Yes, ma'am. Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Got out of sync a little bit. If you plan on speaking today, if you would, please rise and be sworn in. If you don't do it now, you're going to have to be sworn in before you speak. So if you would, please rise to be sworn in.
Do you swear or affirm that the factual statements and factual representations which you're about to present to this commission will be truthful and accurate? Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bauer.
Can I save you a little bit of trouble reading number 2, as I'm going to be pulling that from the consent agenda?
Okay, all right. Ms. Knapp, if you would, please read item number 3 into the record. Item number 2 will be pulled and heard during the regular agenda, or the regular hearing.
Okay, so just to be clear, item number 2 was Tides End, which we do have residents here. So that one is being pulled?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so
Thank you.
item number 3 staying on consent as of the moment. PDR 1608ZP Wyndham Development at State Road 70 and Lorraine Road. This is a rezone of approximately 41.5 acres located on the west side of Lorraine Road and north of State Road 70, commonly known as 5808, 5818, 5906, 5916, 5926, 5936 Lorraine Road, and 14015 State Road 70 East. They're requesting to rezone from general agricultural to the planned development residential zoning districts and a preliminary site plan for 139 lots for single-family detached residents.
Thank you. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 3? Anyone at all? Okay, seeing no one come forward, we're going to move to item number 4. Ms. Knapp.
Item number 4 is PDUI 1605G, Tropicana Manufacturing Company, Inc., Tropicana Master Development Plan. This is a master development plan for a total of 4 million square feet of manufacturing and accessory uses on just shy of 176 acres, located north of US 301 and east of 9th Street, commonly known as 1013th Avenue East, also known as the Tropicana facility. The site is within the industrial, urban, future land use category and planned development, urban industrial zoning districts, and the boundaries of the manufacturing development overlay district.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 4? Anyone at all? Yes, sir, if you would, please step forward, state your name and that you have been sworn. Again, this is quasi judicial, meaning you have to be sworn in to speak on this matter. Good morning.
I have been sworn, Morris Williams. I just want to know exactly, is anybody here representing Tropicana?
Don't know. Yes, sir, there are folks waving their hands in the back. If you want to follow up with them, you can either speak to the applicant or there's a case planner. In this case, it's Rosina Leiter. Rosina, wave your hand. So he's in the front row here. She can provide information to you also.
Okay, I just agree with her because I have no idea what you guys sent me to about this plan. It's coming from the county commissioner.
I'm not aware of what you received, what you're referring to, but Ms. Leiter can speak with you on the matter.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on this matter? If you would, step forward, state your name and that you have been sworn. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Ruby Bird, and yes, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
A concern in this plan, I'm not sure I fully understand it because I have no knowledge of engineering and that kind of stuff. I don't claim that. But I do have some concerns. I understand that, as far as my understanding, there's not going to be any additional land buying of that kind of thing, and they're only going to update the plan that they have into that. My concern is that I've lived in this community, in this section, more years than I want to tell you, but about 50. And for all of that time, we've had some concern on our streets with flooding. It used to be very extreme. And there's I'm from Alabama, so I'm going to say ditch, so I hope you understand what I'm saying. There's a ditch that runs behind Regent Park, and that used to run off quite a bit of the water from there. Over time, when that little ditch is cleaned out, yes, there's a little bit of relief. But when we've had the rain like we had the last few days, had that rain continued for just another day, the same as it has in Hillsborough and some of the other counties, that end of the street, we would have been flooded again because they're resident, and I'm not sure who they are, that took pictures of that ditch being filled at the end of the last day we had that particular rain. Now, my concern is that if I have a big plan, and believe me, I've been there since Tropicana began from scratch with, I can't remember the name, I'm 80 years old, but when he started that, and I've noticed all the improvement there, it's my concern is, how did they manage to build a manufacturing plant this large and never think about a retention pond to make it easier for the citizens who are there? Yes, I understand that all of their land that they're talking about now is paved. I understand that. And being on the planning commission, I'm sure you understand that. So we understand each other from that point. But my concern, whether the land is already paved without a building or a building is put on it, the same rainwater is going to fall in the same place. And if it cannot soak into the ground, or if it cannot have a retention pond, it's going to come into our yard. And we're concerned, and we would like for you to consider that issue before we do any change here. We need in that area a retention pond to take care of some of the flooding that we have suffered for years. Oh, we've tried being good neighbors. I've had the opportunity to move other places, but I love my area. I love my community. And I'm sure if you drive in there, you might wonder why. But I love my community. I came there as a young adult. My children grew up there, my grandchildren, and I don't want to go any place. But I can't swim, and I don't have a boat either. So you need to help me to be concerned and share my deep concern with the need for a retention pond being in that area. Oh, and I guess that means stop. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Bird.
Yes, sir.
Again, Rosina Linder is the case planner for this. She represents Manatee County staff on these matters. She can put you in contact with the correct people, but this particular process we're looking at is a continuous process. It's a master plan. It's evaluating it continually through the process.
I thought I made that very clear in my first statement, Mr. Shepherd, when I got up, that I understood that this was a master plan that was a continuation of what you're already doing. But I want you to be aware of this one fact. Whether we go by the master plan or what. It does not matter how much land they have concreted or cement or whatever term. Alabama, I don't know, we call it cement. Over, it doesn't matter. The problem is when the rainwater falls, whether it falls on the concrete or the ground, if the concrete is there and it cannot, so it's going to run off into the neighborhood. And I'd like for that to be considered, and since I know you're the planning commission, and I'll talk with her.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
I want to bring that to your attention, that anything you do would be considered that we get a retention pond.
Yes, ma'am, and again, Ms. Rosina Leiter would be the correct person to coordinate that with. Thank you very much. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 4? Anyone at all? Okay, we're going to go on to, oh, actually, that's the end of, Ms. Knapp, Ms. Shank, if the standards manual is being deferred, do we have to read it into the record and continue it, or do we?
Yes, we have to open a public hearing, hear from anyone who wants to speak, and continue to the date certain.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Knapp, if you would, please read item number 5 into the record.
I guess, well, I think Ms. Knapp will suggest a motion to the next planning commission meeting. Staff didn't give us a date certain, but
Okay.
we'll have to re-advertise. We don't do the
Do
next
we
meeting.
pull it outside of the consent agenda to do this?
No, I'll suggest that we continue it to September 8th so we can have an opportunity to
Okay.
discuss with staff.
Okay, if you would,
Item number 5, Highway and Traffic Standards Manual Update, to be continued to September 8th, 2016.
thank you. Number 8. We're going to open it up for public comment, though, just to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak on any item that was on the agenda. Is there anybody who wishes to come forward and speak on item number 5, the Highway and Traffic Standards Manual Update? Anyone at all? Okay, seeing none, we're going to close citizen comment for that particular item. We're also going to close consent. And with regard to the consent agenda, items 1, 3, 4, and 5, I believe. Is that correct?
Correct.
The chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Rhodes.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda consisting of items 1, 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you. Mr. Horgan, second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Chair votes aye. Passes unanimously, 6-0.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Horgan.
I'm having a difficult time getting any of the links on my computer to work.
Okay.
Somebody can, technology can come.
I don't know, could we get some assistance from Mr. Horgan so we can pull up the information in the agenda
Mine doesn't
packet?
work either, but I'm just going to work.
I went back through the internet and got onto manateeorg.com and went back through. Mine did the same thing, it fell off.
I couldn't get in at all.
All right, it seems we're having several technical difficulties here.
At least I have a book.
What did you do?
All right.
I'm just going to leave it on this.
Do we need a?
Five minutes.
Yes, we're going to take a short recess, 5 minutes. So please, if you would, we'll reconvene at, we'll make it 7 minutes. We'll reconvene at 9:30. I'm sorry. All right, I'm going to call the public hearing back to order. If you would, please find your way to your seats. Everybody can see what they need to see?
Yeah.
Very good. All right. Again, we're going into the public hearing portion that has presentations. The first item is item number 2, which was originally on consent and has been pulled. So, Ms. Knapp, if you would, please read item number 2 into the record.
Yes, PDR 1606ZP, Neal Communities of Southwest Florida LLC, Tides End, a rezone of approximately 19.5 acres generally located south of 17th Avenue Northwest, approximately 600 feet east of 99th Street Northwest, and at the common address of 9523 17th Avenue Northwest, a rezone from A1 agricultural to planned development residential zoning districts and a preliminary site plan for 38 residential units.
Thank you, Ms. Knapp. Has there been any ex parte communications that need to be disclosed on this item? Commissioners, anything? Okay, seeing none. We'll have an introduction by staff. Mr. Rowe, if you could, please introduce this project.
Good morning, Brendan Rowe with Building Development Services. I've been sworn.
Thank you.
As Ms. Knapp explained, this project is a rezone from A1 coastal high hazard and coastal evacuation area overlay to planned development residential, coastal high hazard, and coastal evacuation area overlay. I'm going to go ahead and let the applicant step forward and make their presentation, after which I'll make my presentation on behalf of staff.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Neal. If you would, please state your name and that you have been sworn.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Pat Neal, 1003 59th Street Northwest. I have been sworn.
Thank you.
When I first came here in 1969, the planning director's name was Nino Spagna, and there was one person, but there was still a planning commission. This is our 46th year of doing presentations at the Planning Commission, about 12,000 homes in a family-owned company owned by me and my son John and Michael and Charlene. This project is unusual. Mr. Bauer, it's the first time I've ever had to say this in my 46 years of coming before the board. It is the result of a settlement of litigation with Manatee County that took 4.5 years and about $450,000 on our part. The litigation was settled at the Administration Commission, then the Governor and Cabinet, then at Manatee County, then at the Administration Commission, then at the Governor and Cabinet, and then at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals. Importantly, Mr. Chairman, Manatee County and the applicant in this case were on the same side. There will be citizen opponents who will testify today, I'm guessing, against this. But the important point is the settlement. What we bring forward today is the settlement reached with Manatee County and approved by all those agencies. And we've designed our property around the settlement reached after the 4.5 years of litigation. Third, we think Brandon Rowe has done a marvelous job. This has the fewest stipulations of any project that I can remember bringing before Manatee County, because we worked very hard to make sure that it complies with your code so that we wouldn't have any bloopers. Nearly closing, this property, Tides End, is the 7th of similar projects, all built in Northwest Bradenton since 1983. Azalea Park, Hawthorne Park, Woodland Park, Laurel Oak Park, Wisteria Park, Estuary, which is under construction, and now Tides End. The 38 units which are stipulated in this settlement are in lieu of more than 57 dwelling units which could be allowed. So I respectfully ask that you listen carefully with the understanding that this is the result of about 4.5 years' effort, at least since July 2010. Rachel Layton of ZNS will explain our application and the means of compliance with the comprehensive plan.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Rachel Layton. I'm the Planning Director with ZNS Engineering. I'm an AICP planner, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
We're here today seeking recommendation for approval of a rezone to planned development residential with the coastal high hazard overlay and the coastal evacuation zone overlays to preliminary site plan standards. We wanted to have a good level of detail on the plan that we're bringing forward to you today because of the history of the site. So my first graphic is an aerial map, And we have 19.6 acres of land located again at 9523 17th Avenue Northwest, just east of the Palmasola Botanical Gardens and the Robinson Preserve properties. To the north, we have residential development. To the east, we have residential development. And not clearly shown on this graphic, we have residential communities surrounding this property. The site is currently vacant, but was previously used as a tree farm. There are no wetlands or native habitat on site. The property is suitable for development and within an area of the county where municipal services exist. This site is an infill site and it's ready for development. The development trend again for Northwest Bradenton is single-family residential. Within a mile of the site, there are more than 10 residential subdivisions. So the future land use map, you can see we now have Res 3. And as Mr. Neal explained, that was quite a long process. And through the years, a stipulation agreement has been reached, which allows the density to be 38 units, which is what's being proposed today. So that future land use category is 3 and would have allowed higher, but because of the stipulation in Ordinance 13-010, which was adopted December 2013, that capped it at 38 units, which is what we're proposing. But you can see from the future land use map, the residential development in the area is also designated Res 3 as well as Res 1. And that's to support those surrounding communities. The intent of the Res 3 category is to identify areas which are established for moderate density suburban or clustered low density urban residential environments. The proposed residential development is consistent with this range of uses. The maximum gross density again is 3. The maximum net density allowed is 6 dwelling units per acre. The project must also comply again with policy D.5.16, which is Ordinance 13-013, limiting the development to 38 residential units, which is what is proposed. The gross density for the project with 38 units is 1.94 dwelling units per acre and net density of 2.05 dwelling units per acre. So it's within those limits of the comprehensive plan as well as within the limits of D5.16. The project does meet the intent of the Res 3 policies as identified in the comprehensive plan. We are required to have special approval process with this project because of the coastal high hazard and the coastal evacuation zone overlay districts. So through the special approval process, it's addressed through plan development. And staff has to determine compliance with the criteria that's outlined in the comprehensive plan. And we've met the criteria. 3 of those most important criteria are the approval of a residential emergency preparedness plan, gross density less than 3 dwelling units per acre, and constructing infrastructure above the tidal surge levels. And again, these criteria were reviewed and approved by staff. The project is a logical expansion of the urban environment and is an infill site. The timing is appropriate for clustered, low, moderate density residential project in this area. In our zoning map, you can see we have RSF1, we have PDR, we have RSF3, we have PDR, and then we have, again, the Botanical Gardens, and we have Robinson Preserve adjacent to us. So it's an area that has transitioned significantly. The property, again, is zoned A1 suburban agriculture with the overlays. The A1 designation was established sometime prior to 1989 and has continued. The historical agricultural character of this area has transitioned to residential development over the last 25 years. And again, there are more than 10 subdivisions within a mile of the site, and apparently 7 of them are Neal communities. The surrounding districts include PDR and RSF1. The nearby development approvals reveal a range of densities in the surrounding area up to 2.76 dwelling units per acre, which is higher than what we're proposing. And that's, again, allowed under the Res 3 future land use map. This range of density allows for a variety of single-family housing products and is the cornerstone of successful master plan communities as encouraged by Comprehensive Plan Policy 2.9.1. Again, so I have the site plan next. So what we're proposing again is a 38-unit, single-family, detached residential community, and it's designed to address that Comprehensive Plan Policy 2.9.1 for strong communities. This development will be in character with the surrounding residential uses. The proposed project is in a developed area and serves as an infill development. It's a logical progression of residential development in the area. The project entrance is along 17th Avenue Northwest, and it lines up with the entrance to the loop, which is what traffic staff have asked us to do, and we felt like that was appropriate. And 17th Avenue Northwest is considered an urban collector road according to map 5A. We are providing a future right-of-way setback of 9 feet to make sure that the right-of-way width for future needs is accommodated. The access will consist of a 50-foot right-of-way for 2-lane street. Sidewalks are provided on both sides of the internal roads. The project buffers include a 20-foot roadway buffer along Northwest 17th Street and 15-foot perimeter buffers throughout the remainder of the site. You'll notice that what we tried to do is put the stormwater pond adjacent to the one property that's zoned agricultural but owned by Manatee County. And where we're abutting residential, we have the 15-foot buffer. And that's along the eastern, western, and southern perimeters. The proposed recreational amenity is a 1-acre passive park. So what we've done is design the community around the passive park that we'd like to have there. While 25% of the open space is required for the project, the design proposes 32%, or 6.26 acres of the site. Again, that's a 19-acre site, and we're providing over 6 acres of open space. The lots are designed to provide views of the adjacent botanical gardens, the internal park, and provide waterfront views along the ponds. The lots are proposed as 72-foot wide by 133-foot deep, approximately 9,500 square foot lots. The building height is limited to 35 feet. Signs, lighting, and landscaping will be designed in accordance with the Land Development Code. The proposed front yard setback, we're proposing 23 feet, so we've asked for specific approval to that, and we've agreed to a stipulation that says from the back of the sidewalk, we must have 25 feet to where the garage is. And that's a standard specific approval request that comes before you on many other projects. The side yard is proposed at 5 feet, and the rear yard is proposed at 15 feet. The recreational facilities in the proximity of the site, again, are Robinson Preserve, the Palmasola Botanical Gardens, as well as nearby DeSoto National Memorial along the Manatee River, which is about a mile away. The school district report indicates the site is within School Service Area 4 for Stewart Elementary, King Middle, and Manatee High School, and the report states that available capacity exists for those schools. Employment opportunities and commercial uses are in proximity of the site off nearby Manatee Avenue. Manatee County's How Will We Grow reports and process has indicated that county supports density where public infrastructure is available. And we have a 16-inch water line located on 17th Avenue Northwest on the south side. And we have a 10-inch diameter gravity sewer line located in the right-of-way of 17th Avenue Northwest. So again, development is ready to just plug right in there because we have those utilities right in the street. The traffic impact analysis and operational analysis have been approved by Manatee County. There is a second specific approval that we're asking for. The requirements of the Land Development Code are that we provide 1 parking space for the park, and we've asked to eliminate that because we want to have a walkable community. So from the park to the most southerly lot, it's 740 feet. That's also the length of the cul-de-sac. So we'd like to encourage a walkable community and eliminate that parking space. As Mr. Neal said, we have worked very closely with staff throughout the process. The project has a positive staff report recommending approval, and the project is designed to meet the goals, objectives, and policies of the comprehensive plan. The project is in compliance with the requirements of the Land Development Code and is compatible with the area. We respectfully request recommendation for approval of this request. That concludes our presentation this morning.
Thank you. All right. Are there any questions for the applicant?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Bauer?
Would you mind going into a few more specifics in terms of the settlement? The reason I'm asking is based off what I've heard from you, it sounds almost like we don't have a choice other than to approve it because of this settlement. Can we dive into what the settlement provided as opposed to what we're here to do today?
Hi, I'd like to answer the question. My name is Ed Vogler. I'm attorney for the applicant. I have been sworn. And the short answer is that all of that litigation concerned comprehensive plan change. So the comprehensive plan was changed from Res 1 to Res 3, which authorizes more than 19 units, which would be 1. And as Mr. Neal pointed, 3 times 19 is like 57 or something. So that comprehensive plan litigation changed the map to Res 3 and by agreement limited it to 38 units. That's a full stop right there. That's comprehensive plan. Now, when you have a property that has a comprehensive plan designation, you can come forward with a zoning application, just like you normally see. So the zoning application comes forward, and you look at it under the Land Development Code, and you say, well, this is consistent with the density authorized by the comprehensive plan, but is the project consistent with the Land Development Code? Is it compatible? Is the timing right? Is traffic understood? You know, and these normal and customary things that you consider when there's a zoning application before you. And so the short answer is you're not obligated to approve this because the comprehensive plan was changed. However, you are obligated to consider that this is a Res 3 future land use category that authorizes 38 dwelling units, that authorized an increase in density in the coastal high hazard area. And those subject matters are closed. They can be commented on, and I suspect will be commented on based upon what I know and have read, but the comprehensive plan questions are over, and the judgment of this board is based upon compliance with Land Development Code.
Now, without the approval, the special approval for the coastal high hazard area, the request wouldn't meet Land Development Code and the comprehensive plan, correct? Requirements? Is that accurate?
I don't think so. The question of increasing density in the coastal high hazard area has been litigated and solved.
Well, I'm not talking about increasing density. I'm referring to simply allowing a project in the coastal evacuation area, coastal high hazard area. This project requires those two special approvals in order for the project to move forward, do they not?
Yes, they do. And if you found a basis supported by evidence, I would find it hard to believe, considering all the evidence was presented in a litigation matter that went on for an extended period of time. But if you think that there is evidence that a special approval should not be granted based upon coastal high hazard, and it's presented here to this board, then I suppose that that would form a basis for your consideration. However, I would point out to you, Mr. Bauer, that there are reams of evidence on that subject matter that have been introduced and considered and adjudicated.
Okay, so what you're saying is we need to consider that evidence. They've changed the comp plan so that the future land use is Res 3, based on the litigation and all this evidence that you referred to, correct?
Yes.
So when you have a project or a property, I don't care where it's at in Manatee County, but it's in the coastal high hazard area, why do you think our code requires a special approval in order to build a project in this area?
To make sure that there's a public hearing and to make sure that there's consideration by the Board of County Commissioners. If this was a straight rezoning, like it was zoned RSF 3 or something like that, could be administratively approved. When you trip special approval, you come to the boards. And that's the reason it's there. There's no prohibition against development in the coastal high hazard area. As a matter of fact, you can build 3 dwelling units per acre in the velocity zone, the V zone. You understand what that is? That's wave influence zone, right?
Good.
So there's no prohibition on development in the coastal high hazard area, the coastal planning area, or anything else. The question is density. It's not project design and it's not use. The question was density. And this applicant wanted to have more than one, Res 1. So it applied for Res 3, and it ended up getting Res 3 with a caveat, limiting to 38 units. Okay. But if the supposition of your question is that somehow there's some prohibition or special consideration with respect to density for special approval in coastal high hazard, and that's not really right. I mean, you're allowed to develop in the coastal high hazard area.
All right. Thanks for your response. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Horgan.
I'd like to have our county attorney respond to the questions, because as much as I like Mr. Vogler, he's not my attorney.
To To avoid a presumptive answer, could you state a specific question for the county attorney's
Question,
office?
the discussion that just went on between Mr. Bauer and Mr. Vogler, I would like to have our county attorney respond with her advice to us relative to Mr. Bauer's question.
Mr. Chair, to begin with, some legislative history is appropriate. Ordinance 1310 was adopted by the Board of County Commissioners on December 5th, 2013, and that was the actual comprehensive plan amendment, changing future land use classification from Res 1 to Res 3. And there was a finding by the county commissioners on page 3 of that ordinance, and I'm just going to read it. Whereas the Board of County Commissioners hereby finds and determines that the impact, if any, of the remedial plan amendment PA 1002R would be de minimis upon the evacuation time to shelter and the emergency shelter capacity within the coastal hazard area or the coastal evacuation area for an increase of a maximum of 18 residential dwelling units. So basically, that the consideration of the coastal hazard area was done by the board when they changed the future land use classification, because the council plan at that time, and still does, prohibits a council plan amendment from increasing residential density in the coastal hazard area unless you do this analysis and make this determination. So, and to answer your question on the rezoning, special approval requires a rezoning of the plan development. So you have this more detailed analysis of a preliminary site plan before you, as opposed to straight rezoning. And the applicant has submitted the application to rezone the plan development. So to make a long story short, you should consider this application like you would any other rezoning or preliminary site plan. There's nothing in any settlement agreement that says the county promises to rezone property to PDR. In fact, we legally cannot contractually promise to rezone property. It's contract zoning. So although this has 4 lawsuits and 5 years litigation and a lot of history, it's just static. You have to look at it fresh, like a rezone and preliminary site plan like you would any other application.
For clarification, when we look to evaluate this plan with regard to consistency to the comprehensive plan, we use the
You're looking at the whole comp plan, all the chapters of the comprehensive plan, not just
including
coastal hazard.
the agreement that was reached.
Well, the settlement agreement, the issues with coastal hazard area, that small area, but there's compatibility in the comprehensive plan and all sorts of other chapters of the comprehensive plan. So you look at the whole plan like you would normally.
Right. And also, the coastal high hazard area, when there's a proposal to rezone, an application to rezone in the coastal high hazard area, it requires a higher level of scrutiny.
Well, it's as
Is that what you
as
said?
Ms. Layton stated, is there a route to evacuate out of the property to shelter? Is there shelter capacity? And there's a prohibition on public infrastructure being located low in the flood area, and the applicant's always required to elevate the infrastructure. Those are pretty big things.
So if those elements are met, then it's determined that it's consistent.
With
and
those
appropriate.
elements, with
Right.
that piece of the comp plan. There's the whole comp plan.
Right. Okay. Mr. Rutledge.
Counselor. And you know I'm not very smart, so let's start with that. So my question is, we now have this settlement for the provided maximum, correct?
Yes,
Of the,
in the
Res
comp
3.
plan amendment, there was a specific property development condition, D516, that simply provides the 20-acre property identified in the plan amendment and designated Res 3 shall be limited to a maximum of 38 residential units. So that set a maximum envelope.
So we have the envelope. So as a board member, if I were to look at this particular plan and say that these unit widths are 70, which I think was represented, right, 70 feet wide?
It's 72 feet wide, sir?
72, forgive me. See, I told you I wasn't very smart. So if they're 72, and we looked in the whole surrounding area, when I look at your aerial, and I looked at all those, and they were 125 or 150 or 200, and we looked at those and said, we don't think those are consistent, that has nothing to do with the legal settlement, right? Counselor?
No, I mean,
That would
it
be
has
within our
to
prerogative.
go through the criteria if it becomes a plan, and you need testimony from
Right.
planning or the applicant or the citizens to support that.
But when they described the lawsuit, it made me somewhat uncomfortable because I personally had the sense of, this is litigated, and I want you to know we litigated it, and this is where we are. And so, but the size of the lots and whether it meets the criteria still would be in our preview, correct?
Yes, any other rezone or site plan?
Okay.
Are there,
One more.
Mr. Bauer?
Ms. Shank. So I did appreciate Ms. Vogler's representation of the coastal high hazard area, but I don't think that Mr. Horgan got, I think, the answer he was looking for. I think what he's asking, I believe, is from the concept of the coastal high hazard area requiring special approval in this project, what was the intent to require that special approval? And based off that intent, are there elements in which the applicant must overcome to achieve that special approval?
Well, I think you have to hear testimony from the applicant and from staff on what the evidence is on those issues. I can't provide that.
I'm not asking what the evidence is, I'm just asking what, again, requiring special approval for a coastal high hazard area was put in the comp plan for a reason. It's not specifically clear to me really what the overall reason for that is. And based off the evidence, what elements does the evidence have to prove or suggest to allow the applicant to receive the special approval? So we talked about the reams and reams of evidence to meet that standard. It's not clear to me exactly what that standard is or what the elements are of the standard. Does that make sense, Mr. Vogler or Ms. Shank?
I understand the question, but the answer has been indicated a couple of times, and I want to try to reframe it. The special approval requirement of the Comprehensive Plan and the Land Development Code is in place to require that there be plan development and public hearings. And that's where we're at here today. Your question suggests that when you're required to have special approval and a public hearing, that there is some additional criteria that has to be met to justify special approval.
Yes, sir, it does. Absolutely.
And as it relates to the question of coastal high hazard, which is the one presented that I believe we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
There isn't any additional criteria of which I'm aware that we need to establish other than consistency with the density requirements of the comprehensive plan, and then come forward through a public hearing process, and as Mr. Rutledge pointed out, analyze it based upon how you see this project under the Land Development Code. Consistency, right, with compatibility was mentioned. I mentioned traffic. What else do you get complaints about? You get complaints about drainage, you get complaints about traffic, you get complaints about compatibility.
Pricing.
And, all of those things are normal and customary, and as Ms. Shank mentioned, you should look at all of that. And I just am not aware of any additional criteria imposed by the concept of special approval because we want to develop in a coastal high hazard area. It just doesn't exist. And to the extent it does exist, if it does somewhere in the 1,000 pages of Land Development Code and Comprehensive Plan, our application meets that criteria because we've applied, your staff has reviewed it, and has recommended approval.
And Mr. Chair, just to
Yes, ma'am.
to sum up here, we did attempt to codify the process for special approval in Section 345 of the Land Development Code, and we've discussed a lot of that in generality. There is Section 345.5, Standards for Granting Special Approval, and it reads, "Special approval may be granted only upon finding that the project will have no significant detrimental impacts on natural resources, adjacent land uses, or public facilities, and only when these specific criteria for the special approval established in the comprehensive plan or this code, if any, have been satisfied." And it speaks about conditions may be placed on special approval. Special approval isn't a standalone development order. The rezoning, you have your rezoning criteria, preliminary site plan, with site plan criteria. The county's on a stronger legal basis, if it ever is inclined to deny something, to rely on the codified criteria for the zoning code, for the rezoning or for the preliminary site plan. Special approval is not a development order. It's not an independent vote. And basically, it was a placeholder in the concept plan until the code was amended to have different standards for these different special approvals. You're on a weak legal ground if you deny something only on this special approval thing. It just triggers a process and triggers a closer analysis in a public hearing.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Rutledge.
Counselor, could you repeat the things that it had to meet? You had natural resources, not a negative impact. Could you-
Okay, yes. No significant detrimental impacts on natural resources, adjacent land uses, or public facilities.
When you say public facilities, would that be services as well? Would that be-
Well, basically, in this situation, likely means water and sewer have to be able to serve the property, not be flooded, so they have to be elevated up higher.
It wouldn't mean police, fire, emergency shelter necessarily.
It might mean emergency shelter because in this location.
Facility.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
One more, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Bauer?
Sorry. Have you considered an arrangement of this plan so that the pond that you're initiating is adjacent to botanical gardens versus homes abutting against botanical gardens? Or what buffer and so forth? I mean, if people that are going to be enjoying botanical gardens, are they going to be looking at, I guess, a bunch of new homes?
I'm Nathan Crott. I'm with ZNS Engineering, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Mr. Bauer. Could you repeat specifically the question? I didn't get it. I was walking out.
Sure. Well, looking at the proposed development on the property, I believe I'm seeing a pond, a large pond that is on the southwest corner of the property, with homes being built right adjacent to botanical gardens, which a lot of people enjoy. So I'm wondering if you have considered a pond adjacent to botanical gardens, so the public enjoying botanical gardens are not subject to looking at a bunch of houses instead of botanical gardens.
Swing sets.
Essentially, making a larger buffer between botanical gardens and your property, or homeowners.
Sure. To answer your question, yes, it was considered. There were several considerations. One is that there's an agricultural setback along the southwest property line there by the community farm. So the larger setback is required because of the adjacent use, and it was determined that that was the best place for the pond. So the landscape buffer adjacent to the park, which is also a great amenity to our community. There's an internal park. There's also botanical parks on the rear. So what a great amenity for those lots to be able to enjoy a park on both sides. So yes, it was considered, and we feel like we've chosen the best option.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Could I continue with that?
Mr. Rutledge, please.
Yeah, so I think you're 100% right. I think that's a great amenity for the houses. But for the public that owns the rights and the views and the benefits of the gardens, I might argue it's the exact opposite, the seeing swing sets and people outside with, their Super Bowl parties or whatever they might have, that maybe is not the best. And so my question for you is, I understand the value to you. My question is kind of along that line, is there not a better design for the consideration of your neighbors?
It seems like we're getting in elements that aren't really under our purview. Is this consistent with the land development code? Do we have the proper setbacks?
Consistent with land development code, yes, sir.
Oh.
Aesthetically, it may not be the best situation. If it's not, the public will dictate. But
You couldn't argue that it's incompatible?
I don't see how you could if it meets the code. And applicants presented that it is consistent with the land development. It seems like the elements we're getting involved in are more aesthetic than related to regulatory review.
Mr. Chairman?
Forgive me.
Actually,
Mr. Horgan?
But it does speak to the consistency with the comprehensive plan on adjacent property.
It might.
I mean, it could.
That's what we're considering. If you feel it's inconsistent, you'll have to make an opinion. Staff's reviewed it, and staff's made a recommendation. Consistency, I think, is probably the thing that's the hardest to define
in the
with
eye
what
of
we
the
do.
beholder.
Yeah.
Right.
And
It's beautiful.
right. I think some people will present that residential next to residential is inconsistent if that's not what you want to see next to you. So,
I love agricultural.
yeah. So, Mr. Bauer, did you have a follow-up question?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Thank you very
all right. Mr., did you have a?
We wanted to continue with our presentation on a couple of items.
Okay.
I think our time is still viable considering the questions take away the time.
Right,
But
we still haven't
But I'll be
had-
brief, and Mr. Neal wants to make a comment also.
All right.
I think this may be new for me to hear that residential single-family homes are not compatible when next to a public park. For example, in this area, northwest Bradenton, Manatee County acquired the Robinson Preserve, and as part of that acquisition, planned for 50 homes on a site that's immediately adjacent to the park on the west and the north. And those were knowing considerations that were funded by public dollars and are in this neighborhood. And so I think that I wouldn't want to allow that question to pass, because I think compatibility is an important question here. However, it's never been said to me before in a public hearing or in any planning exercise that a support use like a park is inconsistent with a residential use. Mr. Neal?
Mr. Chairman, I'm Pat Neal. I'd like to put in 5 pieces of information regarding consistency. In an abundance of caution, I'd like to testify at this time a little bit about compatibility. After all, Mr. Bauer, we've had 5 years of practice on this, so we designed this project to make sure that there would be no legal means that you could turn it down. So here's my go. Of course, on the size of the home sites, which I believe was asked by Mr. Rutledge, these home sites are as large, and for the most part, are larger than the other 7 subdivisions which we've built. They are larger than any of the other subdivisions on 17th Avenue. Azalea Park, built in 1983, is a little bit larger. 2, we've asked Mr. Zollernadler Schroyer Engineering to create the infrastructure above the coastal high hazard level and above the slosh level to make sure the infrastructure was located above the required location, both for infiltration and evacuation. 3rd, we worked hard and considered very carefully the seepage issue from the pond, and we evaluated whether the pond should be at the southwest corner or the northwest corner. We thought that it was far better on the northwest corner for 3 reasons. 1, we know that we can mitigate the impacts as long as we have a slope over that ditch. And we plan, remember, our interests are compatible with the park interests. Our citizens don't want to see the children in the playground any more than they want to see this community. 2, because there's a ditch there, we felt that the change in elevation from the banks of the pond would be difficult to stabilize, and that we thought it was safer from all concerned and safer from an environmental perspective that we not build the pond in that location. The 3rd has to do with the hydrometric elevation of the pond. The pond, of course, will be higher than the adjacent botanical park, so there'll be a water column that's 6 or 7 or 8 feet higher in the pond than the park. We thought putting the pond there would supercharge the elevation and make the park mushy. So we chose to put the pond to the southwest corner where there's an adjacent ditch so that there was no such impact. So we considered the matters that I've heard you and Mr. Rutledge raise, and we think we've provided conscientious and professional engineering solutions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All right. We still haven't had a presentation by staff, so we'll go ahead and have staff presentation and then questions for staff, and then if there's any rebuttal, we'll follow up with that. I'm sorry, yes, and public input. Mr. Rowe, if you would, please make your presentation.
Absolutely. The applicant's gone through a lot of information. There's some redundancy between the two presentations. For those slides, the basic information I'll try to slide through a little quicker, but there are some discussions that I want to have through the presentation.
Thank you.
Again, the request is to rezone from the A1 coastal high hazard area and coastal evacuation area to the PDR, retaining those two overlays of coastal high hazard and coastal evacuation. There's a companion preliminary site plan for 38 residential single-family units on the 19.6 acre parcel, plus or minus. As you can see, the site is located in an area with existing residential development. To the east, to the north, there's some larger lots to the south as well. It's currently zoned A1. You can see that to the east, south, and north, there's residential zoned properties. The future land use category is Res 3, which is consistent with the surrounding residential future land uses. Draws direct access from 17th Avenue Northwest. The site plan is required to provide 25% open space, which is approximately 4.9 acres. The applicant's providing 31.9% open space, which is just about 6.3 acres. There are no wetlands on site. The proposed density is 1.94 dwelling units per acre gross and 2.05 dwelling units per acre net. And just for a review of surrounding developments, the loop of Northwest Bradenton, which is located adjacent to this property, its density is 0.99 units per acre. Hawthorne Park is 2.10. Mango Park Northwest is 2.53. So the 1.94 dwelling units per acre gross is in the middle of surrounding residential developments. There are some that have larger lots, as has been discussed by myself and the applicant, but there's also smaller lots in the area that lend to higher densities, closer to that 3.0 maximum density allowed in the Res 3. The site plan here, as we've seen, the retention pond is located in this corner, the 38 lots, and the park in the center of the, for lack of a better term, circular or oval roadway. There are the two special approvals. One is to allow the project in the coastal evacuation area. The other is to allow a project in the coastal high hazard area. Policies in the comprehensive plan lay out definitions, purposes, applicable goals, objectives, all of that sort of thing that you see for most of the policies in the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan. Those were taken into consideration through the review of a special approval request to ensure that there wasn't impacts on the public facilities, on all of the other aspects, be it impacts on surrounding properties, densities, things of that nature. The method to gain special approval is to go plan development. That provides staff and the county the opportunity to stipulate to reduced impacts on surrounding properties. This is in conjunction with that D clause in the comprehensive plan that limited the density to 38 dwelling units. That's approximately 20 units less than any other property outside of that coastal high hazard would have been allowed, or any other property with the Res 3 designation. There are two specific approvals, as the applicant noted. The first is the reduction of the front yard setback from 25 feet to 23 feet. Staff has stipulated that there has to be a 2-foot separation between the edge of sidewalk and the beginning of the property line. That ensures that there's still that 25-foot between the right-of-way and the front of the building. And then section 1005.3, that's the table determining parking ratios. The one parking space for the proposed neighborhood park that serves 100 units or less. Staff agrees that with the intent of the neighborhood and with it being approximately 2 football fields distance from that park to the furthest lot, the notion of a pedestrian-friendly, walkable community in conjunction with the 25 feet ensuring no impacts on the sidewalks, it mitigated for the need of that parking space. The project has the positive aspect of including a recreational amenity in the form of the community park. There are the negative aspects of it being located in the coastal high hazard area and the coastal evacuation area. However, that's mitigated by going through the plan development process, ensuring that we have that higher level of review. The water, sewer, and reclaimed water infrastructure will be located in the coastal high hazard area as well. This is mitigated through the proposed density being within the allowance of the Res 3 future land use, as well as the allowance of density for the coastal high hazard and the evacuation areas. The project has submitted an emergency preparedness plan that was found to be consistent with the requirements by the Manatee County Public Safety Department. And the applicant proposes the designs for the water, sewer, and reclaimed water infrastructure, those public facilities, to be at an elevation above the Cat 1 hurricane storm surge, which is required by the comprehensive plan. Staff's recommending approval with stipulations, and that is the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. I have a question. It's been stated, I think, a couple times with regard to the process to mitigate the fact that it's in a coastal high hazard, coastal evacuation, and it's to go through the PD process. So again, to restate it, if they were seeking a straight zoning, a RSF 3, I believe is what they asked for, it would not be supported by staff because they haven't had the opportunity to mitigate the impact that it's in a coastal high hazard, coastal evacuation. Is that correct?
Yes, give me 1 second. There's an actual policy that I'm trying to grab for you real quick. I'm not able to find it on the spot, obviously, but there is a policy within the comprehensive plan that references that plan development units is the method of ensuring that it's consistent with those policies.
Right, and I guess just a little bit of reasoning, the fact that it requires a higher level of scrutiny, that the PD process requires more information be provided, so it can then be conditioned or stipulated the approval raising the roadways above the 100-year elevation. I think it's Cat 1.
It's the Cat 1 elevation.
I'm making a misstatement. Mr. Gerstenberg was shaking his head, so it's the Cat 1 elevation. The utilities are raised above the sanitary, not all utilities, because we bury utilities in the ground all the time, so.
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Any additional questions for staff? Anyone?
Yeah, just one question. When you say it's reviewed by somebody for the emergency preparedness plan, who is that somebody?
That's the Public Safety Department. The letter was included in the packet. Let me grab it real quick.
No, just, I just don't know how that works. So who do you send it to? You send it over to Bob in emergency planning? I mean.
It's sent to Public Safety, so the Public Safety Department would review it. I believe Sharon Tarman may be the individual who reviews it.
We have somebody
but-
that's what their specialty is. They
Correct.
count the cars, how many beds, how much water, that kind of stuff?
I believe that the plan itself is for the evacuation. It'd be a better question for the applicant because that's something that planning staff doesn't necessarily review. We just ensure that they've met the requirements of that plan as determined by public safety.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? If not, I have a question. Could we please see a graphic that represents the location of the coastal high hazard?
Yeah. So the green shading is where the coastal high hazard is located, and the white portions are the portion of the property, the subject property, that are outside of the coastal high hazard.
It's a little bit difficult to see, but there are homes underneath the shaded areas, correct?
There are residential lots to the south that are within the shaded areas, yes, sir.
But not new items, not new PUDs.
There was I think, a graphic in the zoning, in your presentation, the zoning graphic. It had a representation of a line. Could you go back to that? It was at the beginning of your presentation.
Thank you.
What is the this dashed line represented there?
That green dashed line is essentially the boundary of the coastal high hazard zone.
So coastal high hazard is to the right or left of that line?
To the west. So west of that line is the coastal high hazard. Included in the coastal high hazard is also those lots that were discussed as being part of the Robinson Preserve project. So those residential units will also be in the coastal high hazard. So there has been recent approvals.
Okay, just looking at that, it appears that it's on the landward side of the,
I believe that there's a difference between the comprehensive plan, coastal high hazard, and the zoning, but this map here shows the coastal high hazard as shown in the comprehensive plan.
okay, all right, thank
Mr. Chairman,
you. Mr. Horgan,
just again, a question. Can you explain that? We have, the dashed line is whose coastal high hazard line?
So the dashed line on this map
Yep.
is the coastal high hazard as depicted in the zoning aspect, the zoning overlays, and then the comprehensive plan has the coastal high hazard, which is this shaded.
And which would be the more recent of the two?
I don't know the answer to that question.
Mr. Gerstenberger, do you have a response to that?
Mr. Chairman, for the record, Thomas Gerstenberger, Public Works Department, have been sworn. The map that Brandon presently has up is the delineation that is referenced from the 2000, I believe it's 2010, Tampa Bay Storm Tide Atlas. That particular delineation that is shown on this map is based upon LiDAR topographic imagery. It's basically radar scanning of the topographic elevation of the ground. So what you are seeing on this map as far as delineation is that particular delineation that is referenced from the Category 1 storm surge elevation, which the storm surge elevation, the Category 1 storm surge elevation that is identified in the Tide Atlas is at maximum 5 feet for a Category 1 storm surge.
Right, and since you have the microphone, I'll ask you a couple questions. The property to the north, it appears that there are some hard lines where it seems like the edge of the development maybe is no longer in the coastal high hazard.
That would be correct, Mr. Chairman. That particular subdivision, the Loop subdivision, that is a prime example of where that particular project was elevated based upon fill, and that the lots associated with that particular subdivision are delineated outside of the coastal high hazard or that 5-foot Category 1 storm surge elevation.
So I'm not asking you to state a definitive, but if this project were to be approved and move forward and constructed, they're going to elevate that area, and is there a potential for this property to, at a later date, be amended and then no longer be in the coastal high hazard area?
Mr. Chair, that is actually pretty much the intent, I'm sorry, that's pretty much actually the intent that would be followed with respect to condition or stipulation B2 in the staff report with respect to the utility infrastructure being turned over by the developer to the county for perpetual maintenance. That was actually the language in B2, that is a requirement for turnover of the utility infrastructure over to the county, that the associated above-ground elements of the utility infrastructure, whether it be backflow preventer assemblies, whether it be water meters, things of that sort that are located above ground, that the elevation of those particular elements, the grade itself has to be above the Category 1 5-foot elevation.
So again, just the process we go through, because it's a coastal high hazard, coastal evacuation, which requires a PD, which allows additional scrutiny and stipulations, mitigate the fact that it currently is a coastal high hazard, coastal evacuation, and developing it, the property would mitigate that element. Is that correct?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all right. Mr. Rutledge.
May I follow up with that? Mr. Gerstenberger, good morning.
Morning, sir.
So I have my kind of scientific question for you. Are the people around this going to be better off when they finish these elevations? In other words, we have this park, we have other residents, so forth. And so always about water quality, water runoff, retention, all that. My question is, are we doing this and things will be better when they do these improvements?
Commissioner Rutledge, there is a difference between looking at coastal high hazard delineation and looking at stormwater, whether it be the water quality aspect, the water quantity aspect. When I'm speaking of stormwater as far as water quality or water quantity, typically we're referring to the freshwater component, the rainfall component. When I'm speaking of a coastal high hazard, when I'm speaking of a coastal high hazard, that's with respect to storm surge. So that's typically your generation from a hurricane, tropical storm. We've had our severe winter storms in the past, things of that sort. That is storm surge, saltwater related. So there is a fine difference between looking at and comparing one or the other. With respect to the water quality component and the water quantity component, there is a stormwater facility that is identified on this preliminary site plan as the intent to provide a stormwater facility to address those particular needs, the water quality and the water quantity component for this project. With respect to coastal high hazard, with that being storm surge, the applicant intends to address that particular facet, and with respect to condition B2, to address utility as far as utility components of this project.
So again, I'm kind of simple. So if you have controlled the storm surge by making this now a white area that's not impacted, does that mean the storm surge gets up to that area or that delineation or that change in, design of the land feature there and impact the remaining piece?
No, sir. The project itself would not generate adverse impacts, whether it be coastal high hazard impacts or the storm water impacts the water quantity or the water quality impacts to the surrounding areas.
Okay, so you wouldn't want to go on a limb and say it's better, like I say sometimes.
He's an engineer, he doesn't use words like better. But
I'm trying to simplify it,
No adverse.
It's measurable.
No adverse, okay, I'm going to say better equals no adverse effects. Okay, thanks.
Must have a liberal arts degree.
That's right. Forgive me.
It's pretty. All right. Any additional questions for staff? Okay, thank you, Mr. Rowe. All right, we're going to move on to the public comment portion of the hearing. So again, this is quasi-judicial. Anybody who steps forward to speak, if you would, please state your name and then that you have been sworn. And if by chance you haven't been sworn, Ms. Acevedo will swear at you. So the first person I have signed up is Mr. Edward Goff. If you would, please step forward and state your name. And I believe, sir, are you requesting additional time speaking on behalf of Homeowners Association? Thank you. Thank you very much.
My name is Edward Goff. I have been sworn. This is a picture from that we've seen already, except it's in black and white. I just want to make perfectly clear that this is Hawthorne Park over here that I'm speaking of. This is the proposed new development, most of which is in the coastal high hazard area. This area here that I didn't know until today is probably going to be dredged out to get fill for the rest of the area to bring it up above level of the coastal high hazard area as determined by the storm surge from a Category 1 hurricane, which is the lowest level hurricane. That does not mean that would not get flooded in a more severe storm. I have a handout which I will distribute after I finish here. I and the Hawthorne Park residents are opposed to the rezoning of this land The property owner was fully aware of the zoning when this property, when he purchased it. There is no benefit to the community, in granting this request. And when I say the community, I mean the Manatee County community, in granting this request, nor is there any obligation to the county to grant his request to rezone the property. In fact, considering its location, development of this property could have dire consequences in the event of a major storm. I'd like to comment a little bit on the ruling, the litigation that took place. I followed that very closely. I think the applicant would agree that the ruling was that the county had the right to approve development of this land, and it also has the right to deny development of this land based upon your findings. Development of this property is contrary to the comprehensive plan in many ways. And I have a list that I'm not going to read to you, but it's a list of 10 items that I grabbed from the comprehensive plan, some of which have been mentioned today. I will let you look at those before you make your decision. As I said, I'll pass this out. Although the property owner has the right to develop his land to the fullest extent, he should not be allowed to act contrary to the comprehensive plan unless there is some compelling reason to do so. The developer wishes to construct homes in a coastal high hazard area. It is contrary to the comprehensive plan to increase the residential density in the coastal high hazard area. I'd like to point out on this drawing that here is Hawthorne Park. If you compare the number of residences along here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, to the proposed in the development, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a 50% increase in density in that area. Now, they're talking about the gross area, which includes the lake. Of course, you're not going to build houses in the lake. So it does increase the density of residences in that area. The comprehensive plan does not allow a reduction in the permeable area within the coastal zone. When you have roads, driveways, sidewalks, and buildings, you are covering up permeable land. The comprehensive plan, it is contrary to the comprehensive plan to encourage people to move to the coastal high hazard area. It is contrary to the comprehensive plan to increase the amount of private infrastructure in the coastal high hazard area. It is contrary to the comprehensive plan to put people at risk of injury or death by allowing them to live in the coastal high hazard area. It is contrary to the comprehensive plan to ignore the cumulative effects on the sensitive land and marine environments of increased runoff from permeable surfaces in the coastal high hazard area. This is just one small area, one small development. But we must look at the overall effect, the overall cumulative effect of this development and other developments which are sure to follow if this one is approved. It is against the comprehensive plan to increase the runoff of polluted stormwater via limited drainage channels in the comprehensive plan. There's definitely going to be more runoff. There's going to be more fertilizer on lawns, more pesticides on lawns, and as you can see from the previous drawings, this land is bordered on 3 sides by water a short distance away, and these channels run right into the Manatee River, into Palmasola Bay. So those waters will tend to get more polluted as development increases. And it is against a comprehensive plan to increase the risk of flooding to surrounding areas because of decreased permeability and increased runoff. Although the developer has indicated that he plans to elevate, sometimes called vertical rezoning, that would not mitigate most of the comprehensive plan violations. In fact, bringing in soil from other areas or dredging in the same area would present additional environmental problems. The comprehensive plan is an important set of rules for our community. It is designed to promote orderly and measured growth and to protect people and property. It has been amended many times, many times, to the point it is almost routine. That is a dangerous pattern that could, probably will, have devastating effects in the event of a serious tropical storm or hurricane. It has been a long time since this has happened in this area, but we all know that it will happen sooner or later. The comprehensive plan should not be taken lightly. There may be some compelling reason to act contrary to it, some reason that will benefit the community as a whole and over the long term. In the absence of very compelling reasons, it is time to draw the line, time to stop the negative cumulative effects of developing property in the coastal high hazard area, time to stop putting people and property at risk. I respectfully request that you deny this request. There are many areas outside the coastal high hazard area where new homes may be built but do not violate the comprehensive plan and do not risk people and property or our environment. Although there are many compelling reasons to amend the comprehensive plan, more profit for the developer is not one of them. Thank you.
Mr. Goff, I have a question for you.
Yes.
It seems most of your objection is related to the fact that it's currently within the coastal high hazard area.
I have chosen to, because of time limitations, I have chosen to pick that particular. I have other objections, but I didn't bring up.
It just seems a little odd that your community was probably in a coastal high hazard area before it were developed, and this property is 300 feet away, and now.
I agree, it probably was. I don't know. Some of this land right here, if you looked at the coastal high hazard area, and of course, this has been refined over the years with the use of LIDAR. Some of this land on the very eastern part probably was. This lake here was probably dredged to raise the land. I don't disagree. What I'm saying is, at some point, the county has to say, wait a minute, we can't build on the whole coastal high hazard area. I mean, the coastal high hazard area is determined by elevation. Are we going to bring in fill and just fill right up to the shoreline? And then what's going to happen? And this is only, remember, this is based only on the minimal hurricane, a Category 1 hurricane.
Right, that's the current criteria, but I just want to make sure I understood the position. It just seems like, I hesitate to use the word hypocritical, but it's okay for your community, but not okay for the property rights don't apply to this property.
I wasn't here when my community was built, and when I bought my house, I had no idea that it was in any flood zone.
And it's very possible if this project moves forward and somebody moves in here, they may say the same if something ever happens adjacent to there, so.
What I'm saying is you're covering up permeable land. My property is more likely to be flooded because there's less permeable land in my neighborhood. If more developments are in that neighborhood, it's even going to be more likely. And it's against the comprehensive plan. And I'm saying, at what point are you going to say, stop, we can't do this anymore because we're putting people and property in harm's way?
Thank you. Mr.
I have
Horgan.
a question for Mr. Goff. Mr. Goff, you've spent a lot of time talking about permeable land.
Yes.
And any development on that property, if it was one home with a driveway, if it was two homes, if it was absolutely as it's zoned today, one home, you would be covering up permeable land.
Yes.
So the property is not against the comprehensive plan because you're covering up some permeable land. You will cover up permeable land with whatever development occurs there.
As did the
I
neighboring
am
properties.
opposed to covering up permeable land in my neighborhood, yes. Because that means the water is going to accumulate at a higher rate and increase the potential of flooding.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr.
during
Rosenberg.
staff rebuttal, I'll address
Thank you.
citizen comment further.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right, are there, thank you, Mr. Goff.
Thank
Are
you.
there anybody, is there anybody else in the audience? Yes, sir, if you would, please state your name and that you have been sworn.
My name is Earl Baden, and I haven't been sworn.
Oh, no. I'd like to take the opportunity, if there's anybody else who wishes to speak, if you would, please stand and be sworn in at this time.
Confirm that the factual statements and factual representations which are about to present to this board will be truthful and accurate.
Yes, I do. I hadn't planned on speaking today. I actually stepped back away from this because, as Mr. Neal said, he's been coming up here for 46 years or something, and I've been alongside of him most of the time, on the opposite side. He talked about this starting 4 years ago. It actually started 30 years ago about or somewhere. I handled it the first two times. I think my file was 1992, and we won that time, or that position was upheld to protect the high hazard zone. He came back again in 5 or 6 years, and each time this went through the entire court system and the entire review system, just like it did this time. And they talk about all these appeals and litigation. They don't tell you they lost all of it. The reason we're here is because they took it to the cabinet, and Governor Scott, in about 10 minutes, overturned everybody. But there are volumes on why this is a bad idea. So I wanted to clear that up, first of all. Secondly, I want to state that I'm not here speaking in any official capacity or any authorization by the Botanical Park, but that's been a project I've been involved with since its inception. So I'm speaking as a private citizen with regard to how it affects the Botanical Park. The other things they don't tell you is that Mr. Vogler talks about they're building a subdivision next to Robinson Preserve. But he didn't tell you it's 1 unit per acre. They didn't come in there and try to up the density, and I didn't oppose them. And I wouldn't be opposing them on this if they hadn't been trying to up the densities. So there's a lot of things that have gone on here. This is not a simple matter. We've been litigating this for over 30 years. I just personally, psychologically couldn't take dealing with them anymore. After you go through the whole entire review system, we had the hearing officers, we went through courts, and after 2 times you win, and you say, doesn't this ever stop? And I guess it doesn't, because past history would say if they don't get it this time, in another 5 years, we'll be right back here. The planning man says this is surrounded by higher densities. No, it's not. There's none. All these subdivisions they're talking about, and Mr. The man that was just here, there's very little of his subdivision that was in any high hazard. If you start at the church there on Ninth, that's above 13 feet. Within less than a mile, it drops to 1.5 feet in Robinson Preserve. So there's a tremendous amount of water that comes down through there. Now, well, I don't know. I guess that's the end of my time. I could explain a lot more of this to you, but it's a very bad idea. This will be the first time that the densities, there's no properties west of this that are on at least an acre, and most of them are 5 to 10 acres. There's nothing west of this that doesn't stay within the high hazard requirements. This will be the first time you're pushing high density into this area.
Thank
So I
you.
hope you'll consider that.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and speak on this matter? Yes, sir, if you would, step forward, state your name and that you have been sworn.
Jack Richardson of Waterline Road. I'll keep it very short, and it has not been mentioned, except for Attorney Vogler, whom I've never met personally. We haven't talked about traffic, and this is an overriding concern of our entire county. And I can't address all the other issues that have come up, but we must start talking about it. And you all are the Planning Commission. I'm asking you to start talking about it. And this development is, I don't think anybody can argue that it's going to add traffic to our roads, particularly Manatee Avenue, particularly during the wintertime. What are we going to do about it? Thank you very much. And I have been sworn.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to come forward? Okay, if not, we're going to close the public hearing portion of the hearing, and we're going to move on to some rebuttals. Mr. Gerstenberg, I believe you had some additional information, not a rebuttal, but a follow-up.
Yes, Mr. Chair. With respect to citizen comment on stormwater, just to elaborate a little bit further for this particular project, the project would be required to meet Bogue County and Southwest Florida Water Management District attenuation and water quality requirements, and I will go a little bit more detail into that. For the attenuation requirements, the applicant, in particular the engineer of record, would have to provide drainage modeling, drainage calculations as part of the final site plan construction plan. It is not addressed with the preliminary site plan or a general development plan, which only identifies intent. For the final site plan construction plan, for attenuation, this project would be required to make a comparison analysis of pre-development runoff rates versus post-development runoff rates, taking into account the proposed impervious areas associated with this project, whether they be houses, streets, sidewalks, any other form of impervious coverage associated with this project. That analysis would be done based upon a 25-year storm event. That 25-year storm event is taken into a consideration of 8 inches of rainfall accumulation within a 24-hour period. So therefore, that analysis would be looking at the pre-development runoff rates versus the post-development runoff rates. And this particular project, as any other project in the county, meeting attenuation requirements, must demonstrate that there's no increase in discharge in a post-development condition. For water quality treatment, this project would be required, and I believe is utilizing a wet retention pond, would be required to treat 1 inch of rainfall volume, 1 inch of rainfall coverage for the entire project. Otherwise, with respect to some of the existing drainage features associated with this project, one other thing I'd like to make clear. Presently, in the existing use, or as in a historical use as agriculture, there were no stormwater facilities associated with the agricultural use, whether they be for attenuation or water quality treatment. There was and is still existing drainage ditches along the perimeter of this project that would have been utilized for discharge from the historical use of the property as agriculture. But as an agricultural use is not required to meet the water quality treatments as would be required for proposed subdivision development.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions? Yes, Mr. Rutledge.
So it would be better.
You could say that.
I could, I probably would.
It'll be treated at least.
Yeah, it'll be treated. We could get more specific, but it'd be better.
Mr. Rhodes.
Mr. Gertzenberger, question following up on what you just said. we just had a resident say that his property, a little to the east, I guess, of this one, and he talked about permeable land, which we understand if it decreases and how that process plays. But you did say that right now, this project, based on your analysis, has no adverse effect. So that would mean that this development would have no increase to the water that could potentially hit the complexes to the east? So it's not going to be detrimental by the way it's being developed?
Commissioner Bauer, at this public hearing, looking at a preliminary site plan that's demonstrating or identifying engineering intent, there is no analysis, there is no calculation, there is no design at this point or at this stage to demonstrate that they're meeting like an adverse impact requirement, meaning attenuation or water quality requirements. Those particular items are addressed with the final site plan construction plan. However, with any preliminary site plan, general development plan moving forward, should this project move forward, the project would be required to provide final site plan construction plan submittals. They would be also required to go through Southwest Florida Water Management District for an environmental resource permit to demonstrate compliance with no adverse impact, with attenuation, and with water quality requirements in place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional questions? Anyone? Anyone? Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Gerstenberger. All right. Oh, Mr. Rowe, you look like you have some
I do.
important information to contribute.
I just have a couple comments that I'd like to bring up in response to the public comment that was
Yes, sir.
provided. Policy 2.2.2.5.2, say that 5 times fast, establishes the purpose of the coastal high hazard area. The language in that policy is specific in stating to limit population, to limit amounts. There's no prohibition to prohibit, to restrict, to not allow. Its aim is to limit. Following up on that, policy 2.2.2.4.5, development restrictions and conditions, prohibit any amendment to the future land use map which would result in an increase in allowable residential density on the sites within the coastal evacuation area. The coastal high hazard area also has a similar language. The request at hand is not an amendment to the future land use map to increase density. The density that's being proposed is allowed by right by the future land use that exists today. So while there may not be units on the site today, it has the potential for a density up to 3 dwelling units per acre. That's further restricted based on the D5 language, which keeps it under that 2 dwelling units per acre. So it's not increasing the density allowed in this future land use category. I just wanted to make that clear.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Mr. Rowe? Mr. Rhodes?
On a follow-up to what we heard, the lot size or the density going to the west, okay, I understand is greater than this proposed density. But if I look to the other 3 areas, I think it's been stated that there are, in some instances, densities greater than what is being proposed here.
That is correct. There are surrounding developments, the Mango subdivision and the...
Hawthorne.
1 second, sorry. There are a couple subdivisions to the east that have densities that are pushing closer to that 3.0 range as opposed to the 0.99 or 1.5.
And do you know offhand at the, I think it was the Hawthorne community, do you, any idea on what that density is?
2.1.
Pardon me?
2.1.
2.1?
2.1 per the staff report.
I forgot that, thank you.
Yeah, the density for Hawthorne Park is 2.1, Mango Park Northwest 2.53.
Okay.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Any additional questions for staff? Okay. All right, seeing none, we're going to report.
Mr. Chairman,
Trying to get your attention.
Mr. Chairman, I suggest we hear from Clark Davis on the transportation issues.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Connor. For the record, Clark Davis, Transportation Planning Division Manager, and I have been sworn. Some of the public comment was on the traffic in the area. The traffic analysis was conducted consistent with the county's concurrency requirement. Some traffic from the subdivision would find its way to Manatee Avenue, however, does not rise to the level that requires consideration as part of the concurrency analysis. And it was found that the project does meet the concurrency requirement, and no off-site improvements were found to be necessary, and no site-related improvements were found to be necessary for it.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that clarification. Thank you. Sorry, any other questions? Okay. All right, we're going to move on to the applicant rebuttal. So,
Hello, I'm Alec Hoffner with Eco Consultants, and I'm the environmental consultant working on the project, and I have been sworn. Mr. Vogler asked me to come up and talk about the natural features on the site, the environmental features of the site. And I've personally been to the site. I've evaluated all of the on-site habitats. There are no native habitats on site. There are also no wetlands on site. And one of the things I want to point out as far as an improvement that this project could provide to the adjacent properties is the perimeter now is currently vegetated with almost entirely invasive nuisance plants, Brazilian pepper and Australian pines. And as part of the development process, these will be removed from the site, and they'll have to be kept from the site through periodic maintenance. And so what this is going to do is remove that seed source that affects the surrounding property. So that's a positive from my perspective. So that's just what I wanted to address today. Thank you.
Thank you, Alec. My name is Ed Vogler. I want to make closing comments, and if you have any questions, our team is here and we'll answer them. Very respectful of Mr. Goff and Mr. Baden have to say. However, as we've pointed out, this has been a long chapter. I don't know that it's been 30 years, but I've been working on this since as long as Mr. Baden can recall, and I personally have lived 23 years across the street in the Loop. So I'm well aware of this land and the process that has gone before. One of the things that you may not know is that there were 462 residential units approved for what we know today as the Robinson Preserve. Those were not built. They were not developed. The over 500 residential units have been removed from the coastal high hazard area in this immediate vicinity. And that's what supported an increase of 18 additional units on this site. Now, as I mentioned before, that's all old history. That's been litigated, adjudicated, finalized, and resolved. Some want to live the old history, but we don't in this process. This land will be filled and engineered and developed in the exact same manner as Hawthorne Park to the east. Exact same developer, exact same design, exact same engineering company. This application before you complies with every code and ordinance applicable, including the comprehensive plan. And I heard Mr. Goff say, and I haven't read his presentation, but I will, but saying something is inconsistent with the comprehensive plan does not make it so. This is a science almost and a skilled evaluation that is done by professionals. And the ones that you count on are sitting in front of you today, and they have all affirmed that we meet those codes and ordinances, that there will not be adverse impacts, and that any impacts have been properly mitigated. We accept all of the stipulations that have been imposed on this project. We suggest to you that it is consistent and compatible, both in design, in use, in timing, and sensitive to the overall neighborhood. And finally, I would make this point, that your adjudication today is based upon evidence presented in the record. And the evidence presented in the record from this professional staff and its recommendation, and from the design team, paid by the developer but professionals, confirms to you that this is a good project that meets the codes and ordinances and should be acted upon favorably today. And we ask that you do that.
Thank you. Okay, any questions, follow-up questions for the applicant? Okay, any deliberation with regard to this matter?
I'll throw out a few words, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So, of course, being a West Manatee County resident, definitely would love to see less building, but, you know, you can't help growth, and sometimes growth is good. Still on the fence in terms of the coastal high hazard area matter. I don't disagree with Mr. Vogler and his interpretation of everything as well. But you also take in account some of the citizen comments, their concerns, and I don't disagree with them either. So it's a real slippery slope when it comes to, I think, rezoning this particular project. I would love to see it have less density, but that's not my call. That's your call, Mr. Neal. And ultimately, it's going to be up to the board to make that final decision. So on the fence on a few things, but with this in mind, you know, with your rights as a property owner, I would love, before the BOCC hearing and before additional citizens get involved, I would love to see maybe a consideration for less density. But again, that's going to be your call as it goes up to the BOCC.
Thank you. Anybody else? You know, the coastal high hazard coastal evacuation comes up frequently, and I think it's at times it appears to be a prohibition as opposed to something that requires a higher level of scrutiny. And I think we've discussed that, and I think hopefully everybody better understands that it just is a requirement that we evaluate it, vet it more thoroughly than just have a blanket prohibition of any construction of any kind within that area. You know, Florida, if you really get down to it, it's constrained. It's an island that sits in the Gulf and ocean, and it, you know, at times if it's a bad enough hurricane, people don't even want to be on the high ground. But with regard to considerations of this, I think it meets the criteria. The same property rights that allow this property to move forward are the same property rights that allow all the residents around to have their homes. And again, it's people looking, not considering how they got in their homes where they are, what the process went through. It's the same process. And it just seems a little myopic to think that nothing is ever going to happen as the property to the property that neighbors you. So it seems like there's been a demonstration. The staff has found it consistent. I don't see any reason. We've addressed the concerns that I had, and I'm going to support this. Yes, Mr. Rutledge.
I have one comment. I have to argue that my liberal arts degree is from USF, so be careful. We have people. But I would say that one of the things that I have appreciated very much is the expertise of our staff and the professionalism and the kind of reasonable demands they make. I kind of, with Mr. Bauer on this one, would like to see less units there, but that's just a personal assessment. And I really appreciate Mr. Vogel's comments regarding the staff and the support and, you know, kind of listening to their comment. I'll be very interested when the next presentation comes forward about your comments about the staff. So I'll find support of this, and probably not the next one.
All right, thank you. Mr. Horgan.
I'd like to make a motion. Based on the staff report, evidence presented, comments made at the public hearing, and finding the request to be consistent with the Manatee County Comprehensive Plan and the Manatee County Land Development Code as conditioned herein, I move to recommend approval of the Manatee County zoning ordinance number PDR-16-06, Z, approval of the preliminary site plan with the stipulations A1, B1, B2, C1, C2, granting special approval for one, a project in the coastal evacuation area, and two, a project in the coastal high hazard area, and granting specific approval of the alternatives to Land Development Code Section 402.7.D.7, reduce required 25-foot lot front yard setback, and Section 1005.3, Table 10.2, reduce required parking for the private neighborhood park as recommended by staff.
Thank you. We have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. DeLesline, second. Chair will call the matter to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. The chair votes aye, passes unanimous 6-0. Thank you. All right, that was item number 2, the agenda. We're going to move on to the next item, which is item number 6. I got to get back to my agenda.
Correct.
Item number 6. Ms. Knapp, would you please read item number 6 into the record?
Yes, Mr. Chair, item number 6, PDR 1530, ZP, ESME 1 LLC, Myara subdivision. This is a rezone of approximately 13.71 acres on the northern portion of a 32.3 acre site located west of 99th Street East, which is Pine Meadow Way, and Clubhouse Drive, commonly known as 6804 99th Street East. From RSF1, residential single family, to PDR, Plan Development Residential, and a preliminary site plan for 32 single-family detached residents.
Thank you. Thank you. Have there been any ex parte communications regarding this application? Mr. Rutledge?
Yes, sir. So I live on 99th Street. My neighbors are here, and I have not specifically been involved in the rezoning process. My wife signed the petition for this. My neighbors are actively communicating with me while I'm out mowing the lawn, and I had talked to the council here about whether I'm appropriate to sit and opine on this. So I guess I'd like to present that to you and see what your thoughts are, whether I need to recuse myself.
Okay. What's the county attorney's office opinion with regard to participation in this matter?
Well, Mr. Rutledge does not have a voting conflict under Section 112.3143 Florida statute because he has no special private gain or loss financially different from the citizens. However, under Section 286.012 Florida statutes, it provides that in a quasi-judicial proceeding, a member may abstain from voting on such matter if the abstention is to assure a fair proceeding free from potential bias or prejudice. So if Mr. Rutledge plans to vote, he has to disclose all of his ex parte communications, and he can vote on it, or he can abstain from voting because he might feel he's so close to the project that he can't allow a fair hearing. It's really Mr. Rutledge's decision to make.
It's Mr. Rutledge's decision. Does that, just a question, if Mr. Rutledge were to participate in the deliberations, would that make this subject to a...
Well, the better practice is always to vote, unless you have a financial conflict. That's the better practice. This was aided by a Florida legislature in 2014. It gives county, planning commissioners or county commissioners an option to abstain from voting.
Okay.
So he would have to, state the reasons and abstain. But under this particular statute, the 286.012, he's allowed to participate in discussing the matter when asking questions of witnesses.
Okay, all right. Mr. Rutledge, what is your determination with regard
Well,
to this matter?
let me say this. I don't want to subvert the effort of all these people coming out. This is the second time they've been out. I'd like to have a fair hearing as a developer myself in the past. I'd like you to get your hearing today. So I'd kind of ask the submitter if he would feel uncomfortable if I sat. If you feel the least bit uncomfortable, I'll leave. I'm struggling a bit with it personally because I live on the street. I have some personal opinions, and I'm sure I don't add anything special to the board that the board can't conduct without me.
Yeah.
So.
Mr. Chair, I have to just caution Mr. Rutledge, the decision is yours. We can't set a procedure that citizens can ask you to abstain or developers. They don't pick who sits here.
Right.
So they don't get to pick whether you vote or not.
I understand.
It's your call, but my personal opinion is that merely living near a project does not disqualify you from voting on the project.
I would think that
You
it
don't
would,
have official voting conflict.
I would think that would, it would have more impact on you and your, in the participation. You don't have, everybody doesn't have to agree on everything. So if there's a dissenting vote, that's the process. It's to deliberate and, unless, of course, you think your wife isn't going to appreciate you.
Well, I may not be able to go home, but
If it's any help, I ran into the same problem with Peninsula Bay, and I found it very helpful to stick on the board.
So,
okay, I will, Mr. Neal, I will try and be very fair and appropriate as best I can. And then I'd like to stay on at least to raise some questions that may come and be helpful.
So, Mr. Rutledge, you have to disclose any ex parte communications.
Okay, so over the last year, I think my name or my wife's name appears on the petition that was passed around to Save Our Woods, I think is the description on the top. I have communicated with my neighbor to the north that I thought that there was a review of that site that would be developed at some point. I didn't give any recommendations or comments. My neighbor across the street asked me about the meeting today, specifically about whether it was on or off. I said I had full knowledge that it would be on. I wouldn't expect it to be off. I have had a discussion with another neighbor across the street, asked me what I thought, and I said I would like to have more houses in the neighborhood. I'd like them to be a lot more expensive. That was a comment I made. I thought it was valuable. And I did comment that traffic is kind of a water flow product. I think I said several of the neighbors asked me about traffic, and I said water flow is kind of the model that they use to count how traffic would flow, not a specific highway. And those were my comments to it. I tried to stay somewhat distanced from it because I was not sure how this would play out.
okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Horgan.
Yeah, as far as ex parte communication is concerned, I've had several people, probably half dozen, approach me regarding this project. My comment has always been, I cannot discuss it because I may have to vote on it. But it is hard because I travel through that area not to notice that there are a lot of signs up and that there was something coming. So, but from that perspective, I don't think it has any effect on my position.
Okay, thank you. Any other disclosures? Okay, seeing none, no other disclosures, we're going to move ahead. We're going to modify the process today. I was asked earlier with staff and the applicant that they're not going to make a presentation. They're going to have, they want the citizens, the people came out for a second time to have an opportunity to comment on this application. So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm not clear on what you mean by modify the process.
well,
We only have one rule set of procedure, and it requires the applicant to speak first. So they have to approach the podium and say what they want to say themselves.
yeah, and it'll be, we discussed what they're going to do. So we're going to begin that process. I just wanted to give a little forewarning that it won't be won't follow exactly as the last one did. So if we could get an introduction by staff.
Good morning, Rosina Leider, Bar staff. Here is the applicant, represented by Rachel Layton, and
Okay, thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Again, I'm Rachel Layton with ZNS Engineering. I'm the Director of Planning at ZNS Engineering. I am an AICP planner, and I have been sworn. We submitted last night a request for continuance, and I'm going to read that into the record. ZNS Engineering, on behalf of Neal Communities of Southwest Florida, LLC, respectfully requests the Manatee Planning Commission's granting of a continuance of the requested application to rezone the property to planned development residential with to preliminary site plan standards for Miara subdivision, PDR 15-30-Z-P, until September 8th, 2016. So I'm going to enter that into the record at this point.
Thank you. And again, was it the applicant's intent to have public comment?
Yes, sir. We would be happy for them to have their opportunity to speak.
Okay, and I'm sorry, what was the date certain?
8th,
December 8th?
September.
September 8th.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to make the public aware, under the rules of procedure, they may speak now, but if they choose to speak now and then want to speak again later, they can't just repeat the same thing later. They're going to have to
Present new evidence?
present new evidence or respond to something new the applicant submitted.
Okay.
And it's my understanding from briefly looking at the request for continuance, there is some new documentation submitted, but staff need to look at it. So there might be some new comments pertinent later on, too.
So noted, and the applicant acknowledged also. Thank you. All right.
Chairman, if I could add only briefly, Ed
Yes, sir.
Vogler, I have been sworn on behalf of the applicant. We are not making a substantive presentation today, and we'll reserve that right. And we also reserve the right for rebuttal to anything that is presented into the record today by the testimony of interested parties and citizens.
Is the intent for your rebuttal to occur today, or?
No,
Okay,
no.
thank you.
It'll occur at the end of the process, which is appropriate. And so today, my understanding is that the people in the public are allowed to speak, and I appreciate what council mentioned, because if they speak at a later meeting, it'll have to be based upon something new.
Thank
Having said that, I just wanted to explain 2 points. One, Mr. Rutledge, I want you to know on behalf of Mr. Neal and myself, to the extent it matters at all, is that we graciously understand that. One of the things that we all come to this room with, whatever set of influences we have, and what I believe is that the decisions are based upon the evidence, like we just went through. And so I'm confident, just like our judicial system uses juries, that the Planning Commission and its members, whatever biases or interests they have, as long as not financial, will be put aside and decisions based upon the evidence. So we're fully in support of you being here, and you need not think about it again.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Neal.
There was an important second point, but I'm over 50, and it went away. So, oh, that's exactly right. He's over 52, but he remembered. We wanted to explain to you and to the public why we've sought this continuance, and it's because we have, as Ms. Schenk just mentioned, we have prepared some legal documents that concern the form of the proposed alternate motion and findings that we will ask the Planning Commission and the board to make, factual findings that would support an approval, of course. And those are being developed, and those have to be reviewed by both professional planning staff as well as the county attorney's office. And we just haven't completed that process. As you might guess, this is a little unique, so we're working through it, and we are sorry for the inconvenience to the public, but we're glad that they'll be able to speak today, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move to the public comment portion of the project. So I'm gonna first go through the speaker cards I have, and then we'll open it up to anybody else who maybe wishes to make a statement. The first card I have is Kate Herbie. Is there somebody that's even close? H-R-U-B-Y? Anyone?
I'm withdrawing my speech right now, thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker card I have is Joe Mueller. If you would, please step forward and state your name and that you have been sworn.
I have been sworn.
Okay, if you would at the dais on record, please.
This is the second time we've been here.
Can you state your name and that you have been
Joe Mullery, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
Okay. This is the second time we've been here. Many of my colleagues, taking vacation days. They have their own businesses. They work 12 hours a day. They're essential to be there at their businesses. Last time, if I remember right, we showed up, it was they weren't ready. This time, hey, they get to do what they want to do. How many times do they get to do what they want to do? That's my question. How many times do these people have to waste vacation days? And yet we all know how precious vacation days are. And so on. And wear us down to the point that one of our primary members gets sick or so on. We're prepared to come here and tend to this. And I don't understand that. So one question, how many times can they do it? Simple question.
Mr. Chair, procedurally, we don't have limits on number of continuances, but I will say that the county attorney's office and staff both request a continuance in this instance, not just the applicant, because new information was submitted, and we haven't looked at it yet. It just came in now.
It's part of the process.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not an answer. How many times can he do it?
As many as they want, I think
Okay.
was the
All
answer.
right, then, just a question for Mr. Neal. We kindly request that you reimburse.
Mr. Mullery, could you please direct the question to the,
Okay,
so we can hear it on the record?
Understood.
Thank you.
Kindly request that he reimburse us for the parking meter. Last time we had a handicapped person here who couldn't find a handicapped spot. And the money, the vacation money and everything, needless to say, he can afford this. Because this has always been a last minute thing with no advisement to us of any merit. And that right there seems unscrupulous to me. So I'm just kindly asking them, like I would do if I put somebody economically due to my cause, I'd reimburse him. All right? This is his doing. As far as a Category 1 hurricane, I don't know how long that's been on the books, but they ain't around that much anymore.
All right, thank you. All right, the next package I have, I'm going to need a little assistance. It's, I think it's related to a video, is that correct? We've got a package of people. Ms. Acevedo, was this prepared in advance? Is that why it's bundled together?
Sir, I am unsure. I was presented those documents and I passed them along to you.
All right, we'll just go ahead and run through the speaker cards and see how this shakes out. So there was a package handed to me, so I'm not sure what the intent is, but we'll fumble through this. So the first card that is part of this package is Peggy Klimek.
Yes, I decline my opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Philip St. John.
We're going to withhold,
Revolt, that's not allowed.
My name is Philip St. John, I've been sworn in, but I'm going to withhold my comments until the continuance.
Thank you, sir. Then there's a showing of the video that has several folks identified. Is that too being deferred?
I'm back again. Yes, I was going to present a video and information on behalf of my friends and neighbors, and we will show that and present that information to you when it's continued.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
had a comment on the video. You would need, to, whenever you do show it, you need to state for the record or better yet, put it in a letter or memo to the board, the circumstances, when it was taken, if it was all authenticated.
Yes, we've submitted information to the meeting prior to, that was scheduled for July 14th, and the records with information there. We can resubmit information if you like, but
Okay, well, you'll have to also state in that whether if there's anyone speaking on the video, whether they're present in the room to be put under oath
yes.
or, okay.
Thank you. Yes, we understand that.
Okay.
Okay, at the next meeting, if you could, please route anything that might need to be evaluated by the county attorney's office to Ms. Shank also. The next speaker card I have is Michael Murphy. Mr. Murphy, if you would, please step forward, state your name, and that you have been sworn.
Michael Murphy, I have been sworn.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to defer my comments till the next continuance, but I do want to object to the continuance and ask that if it is going to be continued, that we get some input on the date. My calendar, I'm an attorney, is set about 30, 60 days out, so we would like some comment to figure out who can attend when. I understand you only meet once a month, but if we could get some comment, maybe October is better for this group, maybe November. So if it is continued, we'd like some input on when it's continued to.
Right, and
Mr. Chair, can you let Nicole Knapp answer the question on the date?
yes, ma'am. Ms. Knapp, please.
Per the applicant's request, they've requested to be continued to September 8th, 2016.
And again, it is the applicant's decision, so they've made an application, they've requested a date certain.
How do we object to that to get a different date?
I think you just did, and I don't know that there's a process.
Is there a due process way we can figure out when we can attend?
Again,
Basically, it
it's-
has to be a regular scheduled planning commission meeting.
yeah.
When is the one after that?
We have meetings the second Thursday of every month, so.
Can we apply to have it continued to October or November?
We're going off.
Yeah, October 13th.
No, it's the applicant's request. It's their application.
Right.
If they cannot work with staff over the next 30 days, they may, again, request to continue to our date in October. If not, we should be hearing the project on September 8th.
Now, if a legal brief is actually being given to staff, and let's say I'm an attorney, I don't get that brief until the day before the hearing, is there a way for me to read the brief, file my own rebuttal memorandum, and basically say, as a resident within this neighborhood, here is my legal brief? There has to be some way for me to feel as if this process gives me due process.
Mr.
Right?
Chairman?
Yes, ma'am.
Any citizen can contact Bobby Roy, the general coordinator, to request a copy of the whole file or anything that's been submitted,
Right.
including whatever's been submitted today.
And Ms. Shank, isn't it also appropriate to say that there are recourse for the process if, for instance, anybody that they don't agree with it, they have the opportunity to challenge it?
Yes, but I'd rather have them get the information up front, and it is a public record, everything's submitted. I think Nicole Knapp can give you the details on how to get that.
Okay. What I heard was something is going to be submitted in the way of legal briefs or legal argument, because there's an issue as to the comp plan and whether or not this is even appropriate. So we would like to actually see that legal brief with enough time to maybe file something in rebuttal so that your attorneys can actually see, you could see that in our legal argument and rebuttal. What I'm hearing is all this is going to be done and it's going to be continued to September 8th. When is there a way for us to object if we don't have enough time to prepare those things?
Mr. Murphy, I would suggest that you coordinate with staff. This isn't going to be solved from the dais. It's going to be outside of this forum. This forum is for presentation of fact, and I think the questions on process could probably be best answered outside of this forum. So.
Okay. I just wanted to
Excuse me, I
make,
just want to clarify, any information Mr. Vogler submitted as attorney for the applicant is a public record. It's in the files of the BAS department, and Nicole Knapp can coordinate with you as to obtain copies of everything. It's a public record.
okay. I just wanted to make it clear, though, factually, that there is some concern on our part that this process is being manipulated to try and make it difficult for us to respond, difficult to attend, and we would like some input, if possible, in setting these hearings in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Horgan.
Yes. I have one comment. I personally flew back from North Carolina because I thought this hearing was going to be today. I knew there was a lot of conversation, and there had been I'd seen a lot of signage, so I wanted to be back in here and be a part of the process from whenever. I'm not going to be here on September 8th. I can't fly back again on short notice, so I understand people's concern that there's some expense involved in taking time off every month to show up here.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Bauer.
is there anything that prohibits this board from making a motion to continue this matter till October? Considering
No,
we've
you
had-
hear the requests of the applicant and the various folks, and then you make a decision. It's within the discretion of the planning commission, the date, the advantage of announcing a date, we don't have to re-advertise it, and everyone knows what the date is.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
I said you have the prerogative to continue the matter. You can continue to no date certain and re-advertise it. You can continue it to a date certain and not have to re-advertise it. The date picked is only your regular, the only limitation is your regular scheduled planning commission meetings.
Is there any input from the applicant? I believe they requested a date certain.
Well, have we heard from the citizens first? I think you finished citizen testimony yet?
No, they asked, when they read their,
Yeah, we have the applicant's position in the record.
Right.
We have to finish hearing from the citizens first and then get back to the
all
applicant.
right, Mr. Neal, let's finish with the citizens, and I see a trend developing here. The next.
Well, you're the
speaker-
chairman.
The next speaker card I have is Joan Bowles. If you would, please step forward, state your name and that you have been sworn.
Good morning. My name is Joan Bowles, and I have been sworn. If this matter is continued, I'm going to defer my substantive comments, but I just want to let you know I am an affected landowner. This is the second day I've taken off work, as you've heard from many others here, and even one of your own board members had a flyback specially for today. So I just want to let you know, if it is continued, this is an undue burden on the citizens, and today we should be speaking about the merits, and I hope you will deny the continuance. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker card I have is Richard Taylor. If you would, state your name and that you have been sworn.
Yeah, Richard Taylor, and I have been sworn. These were my prepared comments, and I'm intentionally setting those aside because I'm not going to comment on them at all. I do want to say that I think we were all shocked and dismayed to hear that yet again, at the 11th hour, without notice, we find out that there's a request for a continuance. To me, it feels like a subterfuge. It feels like we've got a seasoned insider who's manipulating the system. When they were up there earlier, I counted 6 warm bodies, counting Mr. Neal, that are on his squadron, his team. And, as he mentioned earlier, he's been doing this for years and years. So we're citizens. We're individual citizens. We live in this neighborhood that's in question. And so we feel a little bit outnumbered and outgunned here. It's kind of like the guy who brought a knife to a gunfight. So we're kind of counting on you to kind of level the scales of justice. That's what our hope is. The other thing I would comment before I close is that there was, in the minutes of the last meeting, there was something that said there was no comment from the public. Well, we were all here. We all signed in. You have our sheets where we signed in last time. We were called outside right at the time this was being discussed by Mr. Neal to talk about an issue. And so none of us were really here to answer the call. But we were all here. And I think we were all here. Right? So we'll see you next time, I guess. And I expect that next time there will be another rabbit pulled out of the hat at the 11th hour without notice, and we'll just keep on kicking this can down the road for a while. I guess you can tell we're a little frustrated and angry, and we feel intimidated as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Acevedo with the clerk's office. Even though the minutes do state that there was no public comment because no one did speak at that hearing, the public comment sheets are included with the documentation that is for that item.
Thank you for the information. Thank you. Okay, the next speaker card I have is Larry Grossman, and you don't have to step up and say you don't want to make a statement. You can just wave me off and I'll go to the next, but you still have the right to make a statement, and if, as was indicated, make a statement.
My name is Larry Grossman. I've been sworn in, and indeed, I do want to make a statement. Many statements, in fact. Wow, limitless continuances. How unfair can that be? At a certain point, this commission needs to say, withdraw your application. Now, what the applicant is doing is gaming the system. When he doesn't get the right answer, the answer he wants, he just asks for more continuances to give him more time to change the result to one more favorable to his liking. And he keeps on adding more information. And there's a point that was made earlier by the attorney in terms of the timing of this additional information. And we submitted a letter to you saying we object to additional information being added prior or after the docket is prepared and published, and then we find other information being added into the records, which we had no knowledge of, and we would not have knowledge of that until we actually came to this meeting last time, and with the applicant asking for a continuance, and perhaps it was by happenstance that we found that there was additional. How long are you going to continue to allow the applicant to submit information that we don't have time to review? But at what point is this a different application, a new application? I mean, this is, we can make the case we're not being given due process because we have to keep on showing up here, and at the last minute, the applicant asks for a continuance, and then all the information changes. We don't know what the latitude is. Can he submit a new site plan? Is that part of the continuance? At what point is this a new application? I don't know, but I'm particularly concerned about Mr. Vogler's letter that was submitted without our knowledge. I think what we need to do is really ask the commission to consider telling the applicant we're not going to allow a new continuance, withdraw the application, submit a new application with all this additional information, and give us sufficient time to review this. He's making up dates like September 8th. That may be good for him, but it's not good for us. So how many people will not be able to attend and will not be able to speak because of these dates? We need sufficient time, especially as he's adding new information, new legal arguments. So I ask for the commission to give the citizens due consideration, due process, and not subject us to these last-minute requests for continuances. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker card I have is Karen Murphy. If you would step forward, state your name and that you have been sworn.
My name is Karen Murphy, and for the record, I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I do want to take my time to speak because I am, again, one of these folks taking a second vacation day. I'm a professional planner. I'm a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners. I'm also an accredited member of the Congress of New Urbanism. I've worked with thousands of citizens, hundreds of developers in multiple jurisdictions, and I have to tell you, in my own jurisdiction where I reside, that I cannot believe that this is the process. This is not common in every jurisdiction where an applicant can come in and ask for an automatic, where it's given an automatic continuance just because they want it. As Mr. Grossman said, turning in documents at the very last minute, many jurisdictions make you go back through the queue when you do that. They make you go back through the Development Review Committee process to turn in your documents. This is chilling to the public, participation. The irony of this is that we are going to be testifying, if I can make it back here, I have my own agendas to go to object to a process they're making up to amend the comp plan. So we have another one where it's being subverted for the participation. I can tell you I was shocked. I actually worked for Manatee County back when Mr. Penley, before he had gray hair, and I was older as well. And, these processes and the way that we did things, the comp planning and all of this builds trust amongst the citizens. We count on you for our voices to be heard. We count on you for these things to be accessible to us and for us to be able to come and to join this process. The last time we were here, it was difficult to hear. I do this for a living. I did not hear that we could object to a continuance, but what would it have mattered is we're being told you can't stop it anyway. It's all on the applicant's decision-making whether or not to go forward. So again, I want you to put a name with the face because I can't guarantee that I will be here, nor can my husband, even if it's the 9th. Again, we don't always control our own calendars. It was difficult to do this, so I may be submitting my findings into the record. But again, I recognize that you're all professionals, but, dedicating your time to work with us and to advise the board on these decisions, so we understand that you get it, that our time is important too. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think you said the 9th. I believe the date was the 8th. So, just so there's no misinformation. The next speaker card I have is Gary Herbert. If you would, please step forward, state your name, and that you have been sworn.
My name is Gary Hebert, and I have been sworn.
Hebert.
This pattern of delay and last-minute postponements is disappointing, disturbing, and inconsiderate. The applicant himself requested this hearing and has had months to prepare for it. The delays are unfair to citizens who have taken time from their professions and their families to be here. So we respectfully request that the next meeting be a date and time certain and that there be no more continuances. Alternative to that, we request that the entire matter be withdrawn. Thank you.
Thank you. Those are all the cards that I have. There were some that were listed, so if I by chance missed your name as you signed something that was different than a speaker card, please step forward, state your name, and that you have been sworn. Everybody has an opportunity to speak. I'm just running through the card, so. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, thank you. My name is Brenda Russell. I have been sworn in.
Thank you.
And I was also here last time. And I too want to object to the fact that it's the last minute announcement when everyone has made plans to come. And I will have to say, we had asked at a previous meeting with Mr. Neal if he would notify us if it was going to be postponed. We did get a phone call last night. One of our members did get a phone call, but that's far too late to notify everyone. And when we looked at the agenda, it was still on the agenda. We looked at the agenda this morning, it was still on the agenda, rendering that phone call that it may be postponed useless to us. So I'd like that to be noted too. As people have said, we are feeling rather manipulated and taken advantage of. It does not feel like a level playing field. We should be entitled to have a date certain. The applicant should be required to present or withdraw. If he's not prepared after all these months, then he should withdraw. We understand he's trying to draft some language that he likes better than what staff has already recommended. I personally don't understand. The staff report is already out. The recommendations are already there. The motion language has already been drafted. How can there be new language created unless we're going to go back and start all over again? It's either a level playing field that all the participants know the rules ahead of time and abide by them, and there's adequate notice. Submitting something after work hours the night before is not adequate notice. It's very inappropriate. And as I said, it still showed that we were on the agenda for today. It's now almost noon, and we're just now getting the process to find out that really it's not going to be heard today. So I just want to echo my colleagues' comments about the inconvenience and the fact that this does very much feel like the process is being manipulated to wear down people, make it harder for people to show up and come back and have our public testimony before the commission. Thank you very much. Again, we'd like to see this process fair, and we think if he does not present, then it should be withdrawn. And frankly, asking us to make our testimony present today before he makes his presentation is also very inappropriate. We need to respond to what his proposal is presented in public. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and make a statement? Step forward, please. Step forward, please. State your name, that you have been sworn.
My name is Ed Goff. I have been sworn, and I did come here also. I had preparation for the last Drayton Woods hearing that didn't happen, and I came prepared for this one also, although I lucked out because I had something else I had to present. Unfortunately, I have been coming to meetings similar to this for years about the same thing. Hours and hours have been spent. My neighbors have been coming to these meetings, and it's just me now. I lost. He won.
Mr. Chair, we can't hear testimony about prior
It isn't
decisions. It has to
fair.
be about this decision.
The system isn't working. The system isn't working. It needs to be changed. If the applicant wants a continuance, it's costing the county money. He needs to pay a significant fee. It should not be on our dime. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward and make a statement regarding this matter?
Jack Richardson, and I have been sworn.
Thank you.
I've been going all over this county for a specific reason. But in any event, I am finding the feeling of mistrust and of apathy.
Mr. Chairman, I have to request the applicant speak to the issue of this project.
The issue is that this delay is causing more apathy and more distrust among the public, and it's everywhere. And I believe that most of you, or all of you, were appointed by the county commissioners. It reflects badly on some of them. I'll limit my testimony to that. And I agree with Mr. Goff, we have to change the system. I don't expect you guys to. This is unlike the traffic issue, where you guys are going to start to address those issues now here, which you're not. I don't expect you to address this issue here, but we must make the point. We must change the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wishes to come forward? Statement. Okay, seeing no one else come forward. Yeah, well, he's the applicant. He's not speaking as a citizen.
So he was someone.
Ms. Shank, again, for the record, the request for a continuance is consistent with the county's rules and regulations.
When new information is submitted, the planning staff, the county attorney, the planning commissioners, the applicant can all ask for continuances. It's always up to you whether you grant it. But it's quasi-judicial. Recent court cases have gone so far as door developers lost profits, and that can amount to millions of dollars when the county loses lawsuits. So it's better to do the homework at this level rather than have to do the homework in a court of appeal to avoid paying monetary damages. So we have to be cautious in quasi-judicial matters, and I would recommend you grant the continuance. I haven't had time to read it. I just looked down my iPad to see what even was requested during this meeting. You know, we need to have time to look at this.
Yes, Mr. Rhodes.
Ms. Shen, to follow up on a suggestion that Commissioner Bauer made, is it within our purview that we accept the change, the continuance, but can we set a specific date, like in October, where it gives the applicant additional time, it gives residents time to plan. We have a Commissioner Horrigan who flew in, now he cannot make it the next time. So can we look out and say, no one is hurt by a continuance in October in lieu of the 8th of September?
You can continue to any meeting on your regular meeting schedule, as far as I'm concerned. The exact date isn't a legal issue, but there's no guarantee all planning commission members would be here on any of the future dates.
True.
Mr. Rutledge.
I do get the sense of this frustration. It's not just this meeting, it's all meetings. When people come and make a commitment to come and speak their voice, they want to be heard, and they want to be heard consistently. And I think as a developer too, that they want to get the process moving along. So it would be my thought that if we gave someone much longer, instead of just 1 month, and then everything gets scrambled kind of the last minute, say, look, we want to set it out for October. Everybody get your stuff ready. It's a process that we've been going through. It's not a lot of new information. There might be some. But set a date, and then everybody can plan at least 2 months in advance. And then you don't have the sense of people not being ready or not having enough time. I think that's, from our position here, the best we could do, and it would show at least some sensitivity to the call for the request. I don't know if it really helps, but at some point, that's what we've got available to offer.
Mr. Bauer.
I'm going to try to make it really simple. I'm going to make a motion.
We have to hear from the applicant.
Yeah, we're not ready for a motion
Which
yet. Unless.
He can rebut, could he not?
What is your, just before you make the motion, what is it in relation to?
Can't rebuttal your motion.
Is the applicant able to have a rebuttal or participate in a debate based off my motion that I'm about to lay on the table?
Procedurally, we should finish the comment from the applicant before we make motions.
Okay, I'm okay
I
with
think
that.
they've heard this conversation,
Yeah.
so they can respond to the dates.
All right. Are there any other questions, comments related to this matter before we ask the applicant to step forward? So, okay, seeing none. Mr. Neal.
First, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks, members of the commission. I didn't mean to get into this trouble. I'd like to take 1 minute on the trouble that we have, and then perhaps a minute on a solution. It is a fact that I've met with Gary Hebert 4 times and with Brenda Russell, and we've been getting along fine. Last Thursday, at a meeting held in the home of Renee Schneider, we talked about changing the motion, and we talked openly about it. And I think the words I used, and I doubt that Mr. Hebert can say otherwise, but he's invited to, I said we will probably postpone the meeting to be held today. Mr. Hebert has been a very capable leader of this group. We called him, I think, Ivory, about a little bit after 5 yesterday, after we had failed to get our legal language through, and I'll discuss that. And then I communicated with him by email. He communicated with me last night at 7, and I sent him an email about 6:45, I think. So that doesn't give him enough time, and I regret that, and I apologize to you, and I apologize to the people here. The issue has to do with the form of the motion, and the control, in all due respects, is with your county attorney's office. We have been trying to perfect the motion so that it was effective and wouldn't result in any further difficulty if this board or the county board elects to go forward. We think there's an error in the motion. I think they will acknowledge that there's an error. We just need to get it through the county attorney's office, in all due respect. The newest edition was given last night. Third point, of course, we do this for a living, but we've been doing this about a year. It's a multi-$100,000 process. It's just the deal. And as you well know, a lot of things are continued in this world. I haven't personally had the experience of bringing people. I heard 9 people testify that they'd come from a meeting that wasn't being held, and once again, I regret it. We think that we can come here September 8th. If you choose to do so on September 8th, that would be our preference. If the motion is made to do so in October, I'll ask that it be further delayed. One of the problems with that is, of course, I don't own this land at all.
I have a contract with someone who owns it. He's not here, nor is he represented. So these processes take a long time. We're here at all times. We'd prefer to come back before you on September 8th. If you choose another date, we'll make such arrangements. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Mr. Bauer, did you need prior to making a stipulation,
I guess the-
seek input from the applicant?
I guess the only question, I guess, for the county attorney is, they're requesting a continuance, correct?
Yes, I didn't receive any information until during the tied ends hearing, and I can't
Okay.
review it then, and staff has to review it, so.
So in response to the applicant's request for continuance, I move to the Planning Commission continue this matter until the October regularly scheduled hearing for a time certain of 9:30 a.m.
And just for record, that'd be October 13th.
October 13th. So we have I'm sorry, Mr. Bauer, that was a motion?
That is my motion,
Okay.
Mr. Chair. I think in deliberation for that motion.
Let's
okay,
seek a
yep,
second
I'm sorry, go ahead.
first. So we have a motion, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Mr. DeLesline, I was pointed that way when he spoke, so Mr. DeLesline, second the motion, and deliberation now, please.
So the basis for my motion is, I think everybody up here understands the frustration of the citizens here. At the same time, you have an applicant who has his rights to the process as well that you have to protect. I feel as if we get to a new hearing in 2 months. It provides fairness with a time certain to the citizens so that they can plan accordingly. It provides the applicant with plenty of time to prepare for a final resolution of his application. And should we come to October meeting with another request for continuance, I think we have plenty of basis to deny that request and move forward with the application regardless.
Okay,
That's my basis.
thank you. Is there any other information or deliberation regarding this matter, this particular matter?
I'd like to ask the county attorney, should I abstain simply because I had a financial interest in today's meeting?
No, this is only a procedural motion. No voting conflict occurs in a procedural motion.
Okay.
Ms. Shank, with regard to that, if the county attorney's office or if there's an issue that arises where this application, it's the county attorney's office or staff or whoever's opinion that it's not ready for presentation at that point, what's the recourse? I mean,
Well, staff usually works fairly diligently and lets Nicole Knapp know. I'll let her know if there's any issues in advance. I mean,
Right. Okay. Mr. Rutledge.
I'd have a question for the applicant. Is there a financial hardship? You mentioned the contract. Is there financial hardship? that
Mr.
he-
Chair, the financial hardship of the applicant cannot be considered in this motion. It's a procedural motion, and they've already stated their position. so.
Forgive me.
Thank you. All right, so we have a motion for continuance on, I'm sorry, what was the date, certain?
October 13th
And we have a second.
At a
Okay,
time
9:30
certain
a.m.
at 9:30.
at 9:30 a.m. or soon thereafter as may be heard.
Okay. All right. Before we call this matter to vote, does this close the public hearing on this particular matter?
Yes, it's a motion to continue the public hearing.
Okay, all right. Thank you. All right, the chair will call this matter to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, like sign. Chair votes aye also, so it passes unanimous. Continuance until October 13th, 9:30. So, thank you. Close the meeting.
Call down the school board.
Sorry, guys.